Welcome to the Fantasy Audiobook. Marvel. Friendship System. Deadpool is my best friend. Chapter 61. The dead body was buried in the grave. This can't be true. How did he die? Steve said tremblingly. The other members of the Avengers also looked at Steve with worry. After all, they had heard the story of Captain America since they were young, and they always thought that Steve was omnipotent and would not have a fragile side. Hawkeye and Black Widow walked to Steve's side, patted his shoulder gently, and tried to comfort him in their own way. However, Steve at this moment seemed to be in deep grief and couldn't extricate himself. His eyes were empty and confused, as if he had lost focus. He sat there, motionless, as if time had stopped. Black Braised Egg did not answer Steve's question, but signaled Coulson beside him with his eyes. Coulson immediately understood what he meant, quickly opened his notebook, and performed a series of operations. Soon, the big screen in the conference room lit up, showing a shocking picture. Black Egg walked behind Steve, put his hands on his shoulders, and then turned his face to the big screen. At this moment, all the Avengers members focused their attention and looked at the big screen with full concentration. In the screen, Kingpin's diamond body rushed towards Bucky and knocked Bucky away. At this time, seeing the picture of Bucky knocked away, Captain America stood up angrily. He turned his head to Black Egg and asked in a low and powerful voice, "Who is this?" Black Egg frowned and looked at the picture on the screen. This was also the first time Black Egg watched this video. He knew the people on the screen. It can be said that he was very familiar. Who doesn't know Kingpin, the former emperor of the underground world? But what shocked Black Egg was that Kingpin was obviously an ordinary person before. After all, the intelligence department has been investigating for so many years and it is impossible to be wrong. That means Chen Yi has a way to give people superpowers. This discovery shocked He Lu Dan and made him more wary of Chen Yi. At the same time, Black Widow and Hawkeye also saw this scene. Their eyes met in the air, and they saw deep doubts and shock in each other's eyes. Steve saw that no one replied to him, and just wanted to ask again. In the picture, Kingpin grabbed Bucky's neck, and then Kingpin didn't know who he was talking to on the phone. It was obviously muted here. Soon everyone saw on the screen that Kingpin sneered, then cruelly twisted Bucky's neck, and then there was no picture. At this moment, Steve could no longer control his anger. He stood up suddenly and punched the table in the conference room. The solid wood table broke instantly and sawdust flew everywhere. Steve's eyes were like an enraged lion. He stared at Nick Fury closely, and his voice was low and firm. "Tell me, who is this person? I know that S.H.I.E.L.D. has the ability to find out the truth." Nick Fury always felt something was wrong when he looked at the video. The video seemed to be edited maliciously. Why did Kingpin kill the Winter Soldier? What happened to the vehicle on fire in the back of the video? As a senior conspirator, he found a familiar taste, and he immediately decided to comfort Captain America Steve. "Calm down first, this may be a conspiracy. I think we should make a decision after the investigation." Nick Fury's voice was calm and firm. However, Steve's emotions were out of control. He grabbed Nick Fury's collar tightly, his eyes full of anger. "Tell me. I want to know the truth. That's my friend, I don't care if this is a conspiracy." Black Widow and Hawkeye hurriedly came up to pull the two apart, and then Hawkeye, who couldn't bear it, said, "The man in the video is called Kingpin, the former underground emperor. If you want to find him, you can go to Hell's Kitchen." But, Hell's Kitchen. Before Hawkeye finished speaking. However, before he finished speaking, Steve had already rushed out of the meeting room. He had only one thought in his mind: find Kingpin and avenge Bucky. Black Widow looked at Hawkeye with a blaming look, as if blaming him for telling Steve. Then Black Widow looked at Black Sauce Egg and said, "Will Steve be in any danger? After all, that is Chen Yi's territory. Chen Yi will not watch Steve take action against his godfather." The reason why Black Widow didn't tell Steve was that he knew Steve could not be Chen Yi's opponent. Thinking of Chen Yi's ability, Black Widow still has some lingering fears. Hawkeye spread his hands a little aggrieved and said, "Then what should we do? Let Steve continue to be angry. His only friend is dead now. He was crushed to death by someone. If I don't tell him, he will let it go. He is also a flesh and blood person. If his good friend is killed, he is not a man if he doesn't take revenge." Nick Fury just said slowly at this moment, It's okay. I will send someone to protect Steve. Now let's go to see Bucky's body and see if there are any clues. Nick Fury has made up his mind to call back Danvers, who is far away in the universe. Although he doesn't know if someone is planning something behind the scenes, it seems that war may be unavoidable now. Everyone in the Avengers, I need you to be prepared. Maybe our first war will start soon. After saying that, Nick Fury left the office. The Fantastic Four on the side also saw the content of the video, but they had just joined the Avengers and were not familiar with Steve and the others, and didn't know what role to use to comfort them. No one noticed that the Stone Man in the Fantastic Four showed an envious look when he saw the Diamond Kingpin. It would be great if he himself was a Diamond Man. He hated himself now. The Invisible Woman on the side looked at Mr. Fantastic, who was thoughtful, and asked, "You should have seen it. This is a conspiracy, right?" Invisible Woman Susan saw that the video in front of her was obviously deleted. He believed that if he could see it, then Mr. Fantastic, who was smarter than him, would definitely see it. Mr. Fantastic smiled and said when he heard what Invisible Woman Susan said, "Yes, of course I saw it. I didn't expect that S.H.I.E.L.D. still has so many enemies." Mr. Fantastic certainly saw it, and he also judged that someone wanted to use S.H.I.E.L.D. to eliminate the enemy. What made Mr. Fantastic a little curious was whether the people in Hell's Kitchen were so strong that they needed to be eliminated by the Avengers. Susan asked curiously, "Then why don't you say it out? We have just joined the Avengers. Even if we say it out, no one will support us. And I believe director Nick Fury must have seen it. We just need to wait for orders quietly," Mr. Fantastic explained. Of course he would not remind. Mr. Fantastic is not a person who likes to be inferior to others. He also hoped that the Avengers would be severely damaged so that he could take the position. It would be best if the director also died in this fight. In this way, with his charm, he should be able to take charge of the overall situation. At this time, Captain America just came out of the Trident building and saw Tony coming towards him. Tony was furious and punched Steve directly. Steve was caught off guard and staggered by the punch, almost falling to the ground. Tony roared, his voice full of anger and grief, "Hand over Bucky's body." Captain America, who fell to the ground, was confused. He didn't know why Tony was so angry, but he heard that Bucky's body was in S.H.I.E.L.D. However, no matter what Tony's reason was, Steve would not let anyone take away his friend's body. He stood up, holding the S.H.I.E.L.D. in his hand tightly, and said firmly, "I will not hand over Bucky's body." The two sides have been in a state of panic, and the two sides have been in a state of panic. Tony saw that Captain America Steve refused to hand over Bucky's body. He had asked Jarvis to find out all the truth, and when he knew that Steve and the Winter Soldier were good friends. He had long lost his good impression of Captain America, and in his opinion, Captain America was not a good person. In Tony's opinion, the captain in front of him might have known the truth, but he chose to protect Bucky. This made him very angry and disappointed, and he could not accept this fact. The heroic image of Captain America in his heart collapsed at this moment, and was replaced by an ordinary person who was selfish and protected his friends. Although Tony was very angry, he also knew that S.H.I.E.L.D. was not something that Steve in front of him could decide, and he did not intend to talk nonsense with the man in front of him. Now he just wants to find Nick Fury and ask him to hand over the body of Bucky the Winter Soldier. Tony wants to take this body to his parents' grave to comfort their souls in heaven. He knows that this can't change anything, but it's the only thing he can do now, and it's the only way to make him feel better. Thinking of this, he controlled the armor to fly up to the sky. He didn't plan to take the elevator slowly. He wanted to complete this task as quickly as possible. Although he knew that this would make the people of S.H.I.E.L.D. feel that he was provoking them, Tony didn't care. Today, no matter what, he will take Bucky's body away, even Jesus can't stop. He will take this body back to his parents' grave to let them see that their son, Tony Stark, has avenged them. Steve was also confused. He was going to go to Hell's Kitchen to find the Golden Soldier to avenge his friend Bucky. But when he came out, he saw Tony with an angry face, asking him to hand over Bucky's body. He was so angry just now that he didn't even think about collecting Bucky's body. Now Steve reacted after hearing Tony's roar. But Steve didn't understand why Tony was so angry, and threatened to take Bucky's body away. Looking at Tony's attitude, It was not like he was going to take Bucky's body away for burial. Steve really couldn't figure out why Tony had anything to do with Bucky. What was the grudge? Did Bucky kill Tony's whole family? That's not right. He knew Bucky. He wasn't that bad. However, Tony now made him feel strange. His eyes were full of anger and determination, as if he was going to devour Steve. Steve didn't understand what made Tony become like this. But as Bucky's best friend, Steve didn't allow anyone to take Bucky's body away. He couldn't let Bucky's body be taken away by Tony, no matter what Tony's purpose was. Bucky's body could only be buried by him. Therefore, when Tony was about to leave, Steve threw out his shield without hesitation. He hoped to stop Tony in this way, at least, to give him time to think and find a solution to this situation. Steve's shield drew a beautiful arc in the air and flew straight towards Tony. Tony was caught off guard for a moment, and the shield hit his chest accurately, knocking him heavily to the ground. Tony didn't expect that he would be knocked down, and he had already ignored Captain America. Unexpectedly, Captain America was still trying to stop him. "Are you sure you want to stop me?" Tony asked Captain America in a deep voice with a cold light flashing in his eyes. Steve took back the shield and said firmly, "That's right, you leave now. I can pretend nothing happened, but if you insist on taking Bucky's body, please step over my body." Hearing Steve's words, Tony was so angry that he laughed. Originally, he just wanted to take Bucky's body away first, and didn't really want to go against the Avengers. He didn't expect Captain America to be so stubborn, so he didn't show mercy. "Okay, then I'll send you to hell to meet your friend Bucky," Tony said with a sneer. He quickly changed his armor and shot at Steve fiercely. The fight between the two quickly escalated, and their fighting sounds echoed in the quiet shield, and soon attracted the attention of the shield agents. "WTF, why is Iron Man fighting at the door?" a shield agent shouted in surprise. He was originally sorting out documents, but he didn't expect to see such a thrilling battle. "The one who fought with him looks so familiar, how come?" "Looks a bit like Captain America." Another agent widened his eyes, trying to see the other figure in the battle clearly. At present, only a few agents know that Captain America has woken up from the ice, so most people are not familiar with him. "It seems to be true, we have to tell Director Fury quickly." A sharp-eyed agent saw the stars on Steve's chest and immediately recognized his identity. He turned and ran, ready to find Nick Fury to report the situation. "Do you think we should help?" one of the agents who were watching the show asked. Although he is a member of S.H.I.E.L.D., he also felt a little powerless in the face of such a battle. "Help, Iron Man versus Captain America, see which of the two you can beat." An agent immediately refuted. They all knew that such a battle was not something they could intervene in. "That's right, if the sky falls, there is Director Fury to support it, so we can just eat melons quietly." An agent shrugged and chose to give up intervening. He thought it would be better for him to stay aside and avoid trouble. "Who will win, Captain America or Iron Man?" another agent asked curiously. This question is also what many people present want to know. Quote, "I will definitely stand with Captain America. He is my childhood idol." A young agent stood on Captain America's side without hesitation. "I think Iron Man will win. Captain America is old and still uses that broken shield. Now it is the era of hot weapons." Another agent disagreed. He thinks Iron Man's technological equipment and combat power are far superior to Captain America, so he is more likely to win. "Okay, stop arguing, watch quietly, it will probably not take long before Director Fury comes down and this battle can't be fought," an older agent said loudly. And the black salted egg who was investigating whether Bucky's death was a conspiracy in the office also heard the report of the agents. "What? Steve and Tony are fighting? How is it possible? Why are they fighting? Did Tony find out something?" Thinking of this, Black Sauce Egg frowned and walked towards the elevator with a heavy face. The enemy was in a state of panic, and the enemy was in a state of panic. While Tony was facing the joint attack of Captain America, Black Widow and Hawkeye, he calmly thought about how to break the deadlock. Various strategies flashed through Tony's mind quickly. He knew that if he continued like this, he might die here, not to mention getting Bucky's body. Although it is estimated that Nick Fury will not do anything to him, it is estimated that he will have to pay a heavy price. This is not what Tony wants to see. Tony said to the artificial intelligence Jarvis under the helmet. Jarvis, report the mecha data and how much energy is left now. Then, I need you to analyze the weaknesses of these 3 people. As soon as the voice fell, Tony felt a cold arrow shooting at him, and he quickly dodged. Although Hawkeye's arrow didn't hit him, it also made him more aware of his current situation. About 5 seconds later, Tony heard the mechanical voice from Jarvis. Sir, the right leg of the mecha is currently damaged and the energy is less than 20%. If it is hit hard again, it will not be able to continue flying. According to the existing data, the probability of our winning is less than 1%. If we run away now, the success rate is 50%. Sir, I suggest you run away immediately. After hearing Jarvis' analysis, Tony frowned, his heart full of reluctance and doubts. He widened his eyes, as if he wanted to see through the virtual interface in front of him, and asked, Jarvis, are you sure there is no other way? Do we really have no other choice? He must find a way to break this dilemma. He didn't want to go back so dejectedly. He hadn't got Bucky's body yet. If he came again next time, Bucky might have been buried or burned to ashes. If Bucky was simply buried, Tony would still have a chance to dig him out of the grave, but Tony estimated that S.H.I.E.L.D. would do it very secretly. If S.H.I.E.L.D. took Bucky's body to be cremated, how could Tony take Bucky's body to kowtow in front of his parents? Could it be that while scattering Bucky's ashes, he told his parents that the murderer who killed them had been cremated because of his lack of strength? Jarvis was silent for a few seconds, and then said, Sir, there is another way, which guarantees a 100% success rate. Tony couldn't help but feel happy when he heard this. He hurriedly asked, Jarvis, tell me quickly, what is the way? However, he frowned again, full of doubts and confusion. What method can have such a high success rate? He thought to himself. Suddenly, a flash of inspiration came to his mind, as if he had thought of something. He stared at Jarvis with wide eyes and asked, Jarvis, you mean? Jarvis didn't answer this time. Tony only heard, calling Chen Yi's phone number for you. Beep, beep, beep. Tony saw that it was Chen Yi, and he quickly ordered Jarvis, hang up quickly, Jarvis. He understood Chen Yi's ability, and he knew that as long as he asked Chen Yi for help, he would definitely help. But the arrogant Tony did not allow himself to ask Chen Yi for help, because this time he wanted to comfort his parents with his own strength. Chen Yi had told him the truth and helped him kill the murderer of his father, but now he couldn't even get Bucky's body and needed help. His self-esteem did not allow him to do this. Since artificial intelligence had no way, he would find a way himself. Then Tony did not ask Jarvis, but concentrated on fighting Captain America, Hawkeye and Black Widow. Although Tony used all his skills and strength, he still couldn't resist the joint attack of the 3 Avengers. His iron armor seemed powerless under their fierce attack. As time went by, Tony's armor gradually became tattered, and many places had obvious damage. Jarvis's warning came to Tony's ears. Warning, warning, the armor has suffered extensive damage, and the energy is less than 1%. This voice was like a cold water pouring on his head, which made Tony sober instantly. His body couldn't bear it anymore and collapsed to the ground. He cursed breathlessly, and it seemed that he was destined to fail here. And seeing that Iron Man was dying, Coulson immediately flattered Director Fury and said, It seems that our Iron Man. Even under the joint attack of the Avengers, he was vulnerable. Director Fury was very pleased with Coulson's flattery and nodded with satisfaction. It was the first time for him to see the actual combat of the Avengers. It only took 3 people to subdue Tony. This made him full of confidence in the strength of the Avengers. If all the Avengers were dispatched, then no matter who it was, they could subdue him. Chen Yi, who had been worried about before, would no longer be a concern. He was no longer afraid of Chen Yi making a big fuss. On the contrary, he was looking forward to Chen Yi making a fuss. In this way, he would have a legitimate reason to send the Avengers to eliminate the unstable factors. He couldn't wait to see the scene of Chen Yi begging for mercy helplessly and being detained by him. Although he was very satisfied, Lu Dan still said seriously, their cooperation is still not perfect, and they need more training. Quote, seeing that the situation was settled, Black Egg told Coulson, take Tony down to heal his wounds first, and remember to keep this fight. If the military comes to mock him, throw it out for them to see. Then Black Egg prepared to leave. Tony was ready to give up resistance. He was not worried about what the people from S.H.I.E.L.D. would do to him. He planned to negotiate with Nick Fury if he was caught. At most, he would just pay a higher price. But he still felt very aggrieved. At this time, Captain America also put away his shield and slowly walked to Tony, who was lying on the ground. He looked at Tony with complicated eyes, and then said, "It seems that you can't take Bucky's body away." Quote. Tony was immediately defeated when he heard Captain America's words. He beat the ground with his right hand weakly, and tears could not help but flow out. He hated his incompetence and his lack of strength. He knew that his father's murderer was clearly inside, and it was a corpse, but he had no way to take him away. Just as Hawkeye and the others were about to take Tony away, suddenly, a strange wave rippled in the air. Then, a golden halo appeared out of thin air in front of Tony, who fell to the ground, as if it was a portal torn from another space. This sudden change made Hawkeye and the agents present stop and began to look at the golden halo vigilantly. Then, they saw a scene that shocked them. A figure slowly walked out of the golden halo. He was wearing casual clothes, with a playful smile on his face, as if everything was under his control. "This is impossible. Is this magic?" an agent said in disbelief when he saw this scene. Hawkeye and Natasha looked at each other when they saw the person coming out. They saw shock and helplessness in each other's eyes. It was obvious that they knew this person. Trouble is coming. This person is Chen Yi. Chen Yi looked at Tony, who was lying on the ground, and Chen Yi teased, "Hey, isn't this our playboy Tony? Why are you lying on the ground? It's more comfortable on the ground." Tony, who was lying on the ground, heard a familiar voice, opened his eyes wide, and struggled to sit up. Seeing that it was Chen Yi, Tony breathed a sigh of relief. With Chen Yi, it seemed that he was fine. There was also a trace of shame. He didn't expect that he would rely on Chen Yi again in the end. He must work hard to strengthen his battle suit when he goes back. There was also a trace of doubt. Why did Chen Yi know that he was here, and who notified him? "Why are you here?" Tony finally squeezed out a sentence. The story begins when Tony asked Jarvis to hang up the phone. Although Tony rejected the call plan, the artificial intelligence Jarvis thought that Tony's chances of winning were not great and there was a risk of defeat. Therefore, Jarvis took the initiative to call for Tony. Chen Yi, who was far away in Hell's Kitchen, was leisurely brewing tea and enjoying a rare quiet time. Suddenly, his mobile phone rang, showing an unknown phone number. Chen Yi frowned, looked at the phone number in confusion, and hesitated in his heart whether to answer it. He thought, if he answered it, what big trouble would it be? He just wanted to rest quietly now. Chen Yi always hated people calling him. Did he think there was something that couldn't be solved by sending a WeChat message? Therefore, he hung up the phone without hesitation. Chen Yi continued to drink tea with his eyes squinting, enjoying the tranquility. This is life. However, the phone rang again, and he saw that it was still the unknown phone. Chen Yi couldn't help but feel a little annoyed. "It's really annoying, I never answer strange calls." He hung up the phone with a curse. However, the strange phone didn't seem to give up and kept calling. Chen Yi hung up again, but the phone still rang stubbornly. After repeating this several times, Chen Yi finally found the problem: his phone was hacked. The phone automatically answered the call, and he couldn't control it. Chen Yi only heard a mechanically synthesized voice on the other end of the phone. "Mr. Chen Yi, hello, I am Jarvis, I call this to ask for your help. My master Tony Stark is now under attack by S.H.I.E.L.D., and the probability of escape is only 40%, and the probability of winning is less than 1%. I hope you can save him." After listening to this, Chen Yi was full of doubts and disbelief. He thought, why can't Tony call him directly? Although Jarvis' voice sounds like artificial intelligence, who knows if it's a trick by scammers? The level of scammers nowadays is so high that they hacked his phone directly without answering the phone, and then pretended to be artificial intelligence. With this level, why would he be a scammer, or is it that there is such a high threshold to be a scammer now? So here, according to Mr. Chen Yi's past habits, we have prepared a reward of $100 million. This is the highest authority I can use. Chen Yi was not excited about the $100 million after hearing this, but was very speechless. Are the scammers now so arrogant? They ask for $100 million at any time. Do they think they are Tony? Chen Yi planned to put his phone aside and go upstairs to rest. Then the next second, the text message on the mobile phone showed that $1 million had arrived in the bank. Chen Yi, who has always been calm, was a little uncalm when he saw such a long string of zeros. Could this really not be a scam? Could it be that Tony is really in trouble again? At this time, Jarvis also released the permission of Chen Yi's mobile phone and said, "We have paid you here. Mr. Chen Yi, please leave as soon as possible. We have also sent you the location of Tony Stark. You can check it by opening the map. Please leave as soon as possible. According to the route, it takes 30 minutes to fly to the destination." Chen Yi picked up his mobile phone and opened the mobile bank. After confirming that the money was really in the account, he stood up instantly. It seems that Tony is really in trouble, and Tony is not going to ask for help from him. It just so happens that the black salted egg still owes him something, and it's just right to go to S.H.I.E.L.D. to take the space gem away. After all, Chen Yi is still very interested in the space gem. He wants to know whether the space gem will be of some help to the system. It's just that he has been delayed by other things before, and now it's a good time to go to find the black salted egg. As long as Tony is brought back, he can make 100 million, which is still very cost-effective. No problem, I don't need 30 minutes. How can we let our sponsor wait so long? Chen Yi stretched out his right hand to use the portal and drew a circle in the void. Chen Yi looked at Tony, with a hint of helplessness in his eyes. Thinking why can't he be quiet for a while, he felt that the past few months were the busiest period of his life. This Tony is also a tiger. He dared to challenge the entire S.H.I.E.L.D. alone. Why don't you go to heaven? You can't even beat Captain America, and you dare to go to the door and challenge them all alone. Doesn't Tony know that his greatest ability is money? Although Chen Yi thought so, but considering that the guy in front of him was a big sponsor who paid 100 million US dollars. Chen Yi helped Tony up with a smile on his face, and then patted the dust off Tony's armor in a friendly manner. After that, he also tidied Tony's messy hairstyle. After all, the customer is God, and he is a big customer who paid 100 million US dollars. Chen Yi's friendly scene made Tony feel uncomfortable. Tony looked at Chen Yi in surprise and took a half step back. He felt that Chen Yi in front of him made him a little strange. Chen Yi looked at Tony's suspicious eyes and the way he took a half step back. Chen Yi didn't pretend and rolled his eyes directly. If someone's artificial intelligence hadn't transferred 100 million to me, do you think I would want to come here? When Tony heard what Chen Yi said, he immediately understood that it was his artificial intelligence Jarvis who was doing it. He was a little touched and puzzled that Chen Yi would come to save him just now. After all this time, it turned out that he had placed the order. Thinking of this, Tony couldn't help but laugh and cry. It turned out that Chen Yi had not changed. He was still so realistic and direct. After Tony knew clearly that he had paid the money, he immediately became confident and relieved, and began to say to Chen Yi, "Quick, let them hand over Bucky's body." Chen Yi frowned when he heard Tony's request. This was not the same as the commission he received. Jarvis only asked him to take Tony away. Why did he take a body away? This made Chen Yi, who had been educated in Dragon Country since childhood, say that this was unlucky. Chen Yi and Tony stood on one side and talked, while Hawkeye and other agents were on the other side. They remained vigilant, but did not act rashly. Facing an opponent like Chen Yi, they knew they had to act cautiously. Chen Yi's strength and ability were extraordinary. They did not dare to act rashly when they were not sure of Chen Yi's intentions. On the other side, Captain America also noticed this sudden appearance of Chen Yi. Although he didn't know this person, he keenly observed the attitude of the S.H.I.E.L.D. agents and Hawkeye towards him. The fear and dread in their eyes made Captain America very curious. He understood that this person's appearance was not accidental, and he must have come to save Tony. So, Captain America slowly walked towards Chen Yi, and every step was steady and powerful. He had a resolute expression on his face, and looked directly into Chen Yi's eyes. He said, "My friend, although I don't know who you are, this is not the place for you to come. Tell me your intention. Maybe we can find a better solution." Chen Yi stopped talking to Tony at this time, and turned his eyes to Captain America, revealing a sense of confidence and calmness in his eyes. He said calmly, "I don't want to do it. Hand over Bucky's body, and then I'll find Black Sauce Egg to get something, and I'll take Tony away. Although it was a little different from Chen Yi's original purpose, since he was here, Chen Yi didn't want to come to S.H.I.E.L.D. to get the space gem next time. When Captain America heard this, his face suddenly turned gloomy. He felt angry and puzzled. This person was so arrogant and dared to speak so arrogantly in front of them. However, he did not get angry immediately, but took a deep breath and tried to calm himself down. Chen Yi looked at the angry Captain America without any fear. Chen Yi smiled and said, "Believe me, this is the best choice. You don't want to cause more trouble because of a corpse." After saying this, the agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. were dissatisfied. Although Hawkeye and Natasha knew that they could not defeat Chen Yi, they still surrounded Chen Yi with the agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., ready to attack at any time. The two of them were so close that they had to face each other. Steve looked at Chen Yi in front of him, his eyes flashing with a challenging light. He wanted to see if this arrogant young man really had the strength to match him. So, he waved the shield in his hand without hesitation and threw it towards Chen Yi. Seeing this, Chen Yi was not afraid at all. He stretched out his right hand and used magnetism to easily absorb the shield into his hand. He carefully looked at this legendary vibranium shield, secretly admiring its texture and beauty. Hearing that vibranium was worth a lot of money, Chen Yi had already made up his mind that he would take this shield away. He handed the shield to Tony and said lightly, "Help me keep an eye on it. I'll go deal with these people first." Tony took the shield. Although he was a little speechless and thought Chen Yi was interested in everything, he couldn't help but widen his eyes when he looked at the shield carefully. "No, this shield is not steel, it seems to be rare vibranium," Tony exclaimed. He thought that if he integrated this shield into his armor, it might greatly improve the armor's ability. Tony looked at the shield in his hand and seemed very excited. As for whether S.H.I.E.L.D. would take the shield from him, Tony said he was not worried at all, because there was still Chen Yi. At this time, Chen Yi had already looked at Steve with a playful look. He had heard the rumor that Captain America was 50-50 against anyone, and he couldn't help but be curious and wanted to personally verify whether this rumor was true. He glanced at Hawkeye and other S.H.I.E.L.D. people beside him, and said contemptuously, "Since Captain America has started the war on behalf of your S.H.I.E.L.D., you might as well join us, otherwise I'm afraid you won't have a chance." Before he finished speaking, Chen Yi's figure had disappeared from the spot, leaving the S.H.I.E.L.D. agents looking at each other, unable to react. Then, a loud noise sounded in their ears, and they were horrified to see that Steve had been knocked to the ground by Chen Yi. The power of this blow was amazing. Steve struggled to stand up, but felt that his body became extremely heavy. It was as if an invisible big hand was pressing on him tightly, making him unable to move. A trace of shock and unwillingness flashed in his eyes. This guy named Chen Yi was so strong. Steve felt very aggrieved. He was a soldier in World War II. He had experienced countless life and death tests and never thought that he would be knocked down so easily. However, his consciousness was extremely tenacious. Even though his body could not move, he still gritted his teeth and tried his best to stand up. At the same time, the agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. also began to take action. Hawkeye, Natasha and others quickly attacked Chen Yi. Their movements were agile and decisive, and they were obviously well-trained fighters. Fighter planes and tanks were also ready to go. They roared like beasts and fired at Chen Yi's position. For a time, the sky and the ground were covered with artillery fire. Shells and bullets streaked through the air, attacking Chen Yi like meteors. Such fire suppression was enough to scare any enemy. However, facing the full attack of S.H.I.E.L.D., Chen Yi did not show any fear. His eyes flashed with confidence and determination, as if everything was under his control. He opened his hands, and the shells and bullets attacking him were instantly frozen in the air and stopped moving forward. This scene shocked and despaired Captain America and the group of S.H.I.E.L.D. agents lying on the ground. They couldn't believe their eyes, and they couldn't understand why Chen Yi had such a powerful force. But Chen Yi just smiled at them and said, "You are too enthusiastic. You gave me such a big gift, but I don't like it very much, so I will give it back to you." With a wave of Chen Yi's hand, the stopped bombs and bullets were driven by magnetic force and suddenly changed direction and attacked the original launch source. This scene was like magic, which made everyone present stunned. Then, explosions came one after another, and countless agents who did not react quickly enough were hit by their own bullets. Some died on the spot, and some were seriously injured. Even the tanks and helicopters were not spared. They became so fragile under Chen Yi's ability. The whole scene instantly became as tragic as purgatory. The elite agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. suffered heavy losses in this sudden counterattack. The air was filled with the smell of smoke and dust, and the blood and the wreckage formed a desolate picture. Captain America lay on the ground, looking at the scene in front of him, his heart filled with despair. Chen Yi slowly walked towards Captain America, who was being pressed down by his gravity ability, with a hint of helplessness and ridicule in his eyes. He said, "Look, how many people lost their lives because you refused to hand over the body of the Winter Soldier." Captain America heard Chen Yi's words and just glared at Chen Yi, his eyes full of anger and unwillingness. If eyes could kill, Chen Yi would probably have been killed by Captain America several times. However, Chen Yi did not back down. He looked directly into Captain America's eyes and continued, "Don't look at me like that, I was just defending myself, and I look like a villain." Chen Yi really didn't do anything. Those people were killed by his own bullets. Could it be that others were going to kill him, and he couldn't resist? Then he was beaten to death and buried in the pit. Captain America asked with gritted teeth, "Why do you have to take Bucky's body away?" There was an unspeakable pain and confusion in his voice. This question has been bothering him, and it has not been answered from the beginning to now. Chen Yi was very surprised to hear Captain America's question. It turned out that no one had told Captain America about Bucky. Chen Yi looked at Tony, who was sitting on the ground speechlessly, and then simply told him about Bucky killing Tony's parents. Impossible, Bucky is not such a person. At this time, Captain America felt unbelievable and angry after hearing about Bucky. Bucky could not be such a person in Captain America's impression. He felt that Chen Yi in front of him was deceiving her and slandering his friends. "Anyway, this is the case. Believe it or not," Chen Yi said, and lifted Captain America with one hand using chaos magic. Chen Yi didn't care whether Captain America believed it or not. This guy was too kind and too saintly. Thinking the world is too beautiful, Chen Yi felt that Captain America was still so naive even though he was over 100 years old, as if he had never experienced the beatings of society. Chen Yi called Tony to go to the office building of S.H.I.E.L.D. He took Tony to find Black Sauce Egg and asked him for the Space Stone and the body of the Winter Soldier. To be on the safe side, Chen Yi took Captain America with him so that he could exchange him when necessary. The two of them were so busy that they had to wait for the next few days. When Chen Yi and his party walked into the office building of S.H.I.E.L.D., Chen Yi could feel that the atmosphere around him was a little tense. On both sides of the corridor, S.H.I.E.L.D. agents appeared one after another, their eyes full of deep fear of Chen Yi. The guns in their hands were tightly aimed at Chen Yi and Tony, as if they would shoot without hesitation if there was any movement. Chen Yi looked up and saw that the camera in the corner was quietly watching him. He knew that Nick Fury must be paying close attention to everything here in the monitoring room. He raised a playful smile at the corner of his mouth, and slowly said to the camera, "Are you sure you want to let your people continue to die? Black braised eggs, you know they can't stop me." Then he continued, "I'm not a person who likes to kill people. I just want to find your things. Fighting and killing are boring." There was a sense of helplessness and boredom in his tone, as if all these disputes and battles had nothing to do with him. After saying this, Chen Yi turned his eyes to the gun-wielding agents. He smiled slightly and said, "Don't be nervous, I'm really not that kind of person." There was a kind of sincerity and kindness in his voice, as if telling these agents that he was not a cruel and ruthless enemy. Chen Yi felt that he was really not a bloodthirsty person. Compared with other people in Hell's Kitchen, he was already a good citizen. However, Chen Yi's self-proclaimed friendly smile was a devilish smile in the eyes of these S.H.I.E.L.D. agents. The vigilance and tension in their eyes seemed to materialize, making them hold their guns more tightly, trying to find a sense of security from the cold metal. They knew very well that the man in front of them, although he looked gentle on the surface, was actually a dangerous person who was hiding his true colors. Tony rolled his eyes after hearing Chen Yi's words. He never thought that Chen Yi was such a shameless person. As expected, he was a man from Hell's Kitchen. He lied without blinking, but he did not refute it. He himself was not a bloodthirsty person. From the beginning to the end, his goal was just to get Bucky's body. If he could create less killing, it would naturally be better. That would naturally be a better choice. He did not like violence, nor did he like to see innocent people being hurt. Despite this, Tony had to admit that Chen Yi was actually right. Compared with other people in Hell's Kitchen, Chen Yi was indeed a good citizen. Tony conducted an in-depth investigation of Chen Yi and found that apart from his strong obsession with money and his dislike for Nico, he performed very well in other aspects. He is sincere to his friends and kind to those around him. His kindness and sense of responsibility can be seen from his deeds of building a school for Hell's Kitchen and adopting orphans. What is more worth mentioning is that Chen Yi has the concept of equality for all. Whether facing the beggars in Hell's Kitchen or facing him, a billionaire, he can maintain an equal attitude. This quality makes Tony deeply appreciated, and it is also one of the reasons why he is willing to make friends with Chen Yi. Although their origins and backgrounds are very different, their friendship has crossed these obstacles and become a rare and precious friendship. On the other side of the camera, Nick Fury also heard Chen Yi's words, and his eyes were very angry and cold. In his view, Chen Yi's kindness is an arrogant provocation and a mockery of the incompetence of their shield. Chen Yi is really lawless. He must be strangled at all costs. Nick Fury roared in his heart. He clenched his hands into fists, and his knuckles turned white with anger. He could not tolerate anyone looking down on his shield so much, and he could not tolerate someone being so arrogant on his territory. Coulson, who was standing aside, asked Director Fury with a firm look in his eyes, "Director, don't worry, none of our shield agents are cowards, and we must leave behind this arrogant guy Chen Yi. What can a man endure?" As an agent of shield, Coulson was very angry when he saw the enemy's provocation at his doorstep. Even though he knew that Chen Yi was very powerful, he would make Chen Yi pay the price even if he sacrificed everyone. Director Fury turned his head and looked at Coulson deeply. He knew that Coulson felt the same as him, angry and unwilling. When had their shield ever been provoked like this? But he also understood that anger could not solve the problem. He had to think calmly and find the best solution. Nick Fury gritted his teeth and said, "Let the agents go back, and then let the medical staff rescue the injured agents outside. Let Chen Yi and others come up." His voice was full of helplessness and unwillingness, but he knew that this was the best choice at present. They can't have any more meaningless casualties. "Director, let them up so easily." Coulson's voice was full of confusion and doubt. He stared at Director Fury with wide eyes, as if looking for a reasonable explanation. Director Fury looked at Coulson and sighed deeply. "This is an order, we can't have any more meaningless casualties." Coulson's expression became complicated in an instant, and a trace of unwillingness and anger flashed in his eyes. But he understood that as a member of S.H.I.E.L.D., he must obey orders. He gritted his teeth, turned around and left to execute the order that made him feel powerless. Nick Fury understood Coulson's unwillingness, and so did he. If anyone wanted Chen Yi dead the most, it must be him. If the human wave tactic could kill Chen Yi, he would definitely let all the agents go without hesitation. He was not the kind of saintly person. For him, as long as he could complete the mission, he would use everything and everyone that could be used. But the problem was that the human wave tactic had no meaning for a superpower like Chen Yi. It would be better to just let them stop and let Chen Yi and his gang come up. He also thought about letting the remaining Avengers fight Chen Yi, but he also knew that this was also an unrealistic idea. Dr. Banner and Professor X had already left here, leaving only the Fantastic Four in S.H.I.E.L.D. Nick Fury turned his gaze to the window, his heart full of expectations. He had contacted Carol, who was far away from the Earth, and hoped that she would come back as soon as possible. He knew that only when the Avengers and the X-Men were fully assembled could they take down Chen Yi in one fell swoop. "Carol, come back soon, the Earth needs you," he whispered to himself, as if calling to the distant starry sky. The S.H.I.E.L.D. agents were still holding guns and confronting Chen Yi and his gang. Chen Yi and Tony didn't seem to care about the tense atmosphere. They were calm and walked towards the elevator. The S.H.I.E.L.D. agents looked at each other, their eyes full of confusion and hesitation. The guns in their hands were heavy, and everyone was weighing in their hearts, should they shoot? Just when the agents were hesitant and at a loss, a figure came from the end of the corridor. It was Coulson, a senior agent of S.H.I.E.L.D. His appearance made everyone present feel relieved, as if they had found the backbone. Coulson walked up to the crowd and nodded to the SHIELD agents, signaling them to temporarily step aside. He said to the agents in a steady voice, "Go outside and see if there are any injured colleagues who need rescue." Although the agents were somewhat unwilling, they still quickly left the scene according to the order. Then, Coulson turned to Chen Yi and Tony, his face full of complex emotions, the most of which was deep hatred. He gritted his teeth and said, "Director Fury asked you to go upstairs." His voice was full of reluctance and helplessness, as if he was enduring great pain. Although he was reluctant, Coulson still took Chen Yi and Tony to the elevator. The elevator door slowly closed, isolating them from the outside world. In the elevator, the atmosphere was still tense. Coulson stared at Chen Yi. If the elevator fall could kill Chen Yi, he would definitely break the elevator rope without hesitation and die with Chen Yi. It was hard for Chen Yi and Tony to ignore the hostility and hatred emanating from Coulson. Tony couldn't help but tease Chen Yi, "Look at how hated he is." Chen Yi rolled his eyes at Tony, and secretly complained in his heart, "Isn't it all because of you that others look at me with such hatred? You are still gloating over my misfortune." He thought of his leisurely time in Hell's Kitchen, drinking tea and slacking off. Why did he need to wade into this muddy water? At this moment, he felt that the $100 million he received was too little. He originally thought that it would be a simple matter of rescuing Tony, but he didn't expect that he would have to get a corpse. It was really troublesome. "Then I leave. You go talk to He Lu Dan yourself." Chen Yi pretended to press the elevator button for the first floor. Tony quickly pressed Chen Yi and said, "No, no, no, let's go together. You took my money. What's wrong with a few jokes from your employer?" Tony didn't dare to go to find the black marinated egg alone. If he went there, he might not be able to leave. He would be skinned alive if he didn't die. After all, it was indeed his fault. Just when Coulson was about to be unable to bear the frivolous interaction between Tony and Chen Yi, he stood at the elevator door and witnessed the unbearable frivolous interaction between Tony and Chen Yi, as if they were deliberately provoking his patience. However, the elevator door finally opened, and he seemed to be relieved and walked out of the elevator first. Coulson led Chen Yi and his gang in and left. In the office, Nick Fury stared at Chen Yi and Tony with a cold look. His eyes wandered between the two, as if trying to find their weaknesses. However, Chen Yi seemed not to see his gaze. He sat down in a comfortable position as if he was back home, and then said to Nick Fury, "No, guests are coming, and you don't give us something to drink. Is this how SHIELD entertains guests?" Black Broiled Egg said in a deep voice, "Stop talking nonsense, and tell us your purpose." What the hell, guests? If he couldn't beat Chen Yi, Black Broiled Egg really wanted to slap him. Every time I heard Chen Yi's name, I had a lot of troubles. Chen Yi didn't care and said, "After all, this is the first time we meet, right? There's no need to make it so stiff. This time, first, I came to SHIELD to ask for Bucky's body on behalf of our sponsor Tony. Second, you promised me before that you could pick up some items from you. I'll take it by the way." Tony, who was sitting next to him, also nodded. After listening to Chen Yi's request, He Lu Dan understood the first point, but he didn't expect Chen Yi to come to his territory and still expect to take things from him. He Lu Dan frowned and looked at Tony. He didn't expect Tony to know the truth about his parents' death. He was very curious about how Tony knew it. He only knew this news. "I just found out not long ago that few people in this world know the real cause of death of the Howards." Then Black Egg looked at Steve, who was tied up by Chen Yi behind him. He also understood that Chen Yi was using Steve as a bargaining chip, and he also knew that Tony would never join the Avengers. He could only choose one between Steve and Tony. He thought about the pros and cons and was silent for a moment before saying, "Bucky's body can be used to release Steve. But the previous conditions are invalid. I can't do anything to support the enemy." His tone was firm and decisive, as if telling Chen Yi that this was his bottom line. "Steve is very important. He can be said to be the soul of the entire Avengers. He is the one who unites the entire Avengers and is crucial. In comparison, Bucky's body is worthless, although Black Egg knows that Captain America will hate him if he hands over Bucky's body. But Black Egg doesn't care. On the contrary, Steve hates Chen Yi more than he hates him. Black Sauce Egg agreed to Chen Yi before because they had not torn their faces apart, but now they have torn their faces apart. Although they themselves do not know what the rare treasures in the shield warehouse are for, even if it is a piece of scrap metal, it is impossible to give it to Chen Yi. I promise that I will only borrow this cosmic cube for a while and will return it to you later, don't worry. Chen Yi's voice was calm and firm, as if he was trying to comfort He Lu Dan's emotions. However, his words revealed an unquestionable domineering aura, as if telling He Lu Dan that his decision was irreversible. There was a sharp light in his eyes, as if telling He Lu Dan that he was not joking. Cosmic Cube, how did Chen Yi know about it? He Lu Dan looked at Chen Yi in surprise. Although S.H.I.E.L.D. has been studying the Cosmic Cube for some time, there has been no progress. Now Chen Yi suddenly mentioned the Cosmic Cube, which surprised him. He began to doubt whether Chen Yi knew the true value of the Cosmic Cube or whether he had any purpose. When he thought of this, He Lu Dan didn't want to compromise even more. Chen Yi looked at He Lu Dan, who was thinking, I promise, I will borrow this Cosmic Cube for a while and return it to you later. Don't worry, if you don't give it to me, I can only rob it myself. Quote. The premise is that the space stone is useless to the system. If it is useless, Chen Yi does not intend to take the space stone. After all, this thing will attract Thanos' attention. It is better to keep it in S.H.I.E.L.D. to attract firepower. Just when the atmosphere was deadlocked, Chen Yi's eyes suddenly turned red. A strong aura emanated from him, forcing Black Egg. He was ready to start using chaos magic to show his determination. If Black Egg did not hand over the Cosmic Cube, he would kill the entire S.H.I.E.L.D. The two of them were in a mess. Director Fury stood in front of Chen Yi, his face full of determination and helplessness. Fury took a deep breath, as if to absorb the humiliation and pain in his heart. His voice was low and firm. Chen Yi, I can give you Bucky's body and the Cosmic Cube. But you only have 3 days. After 3 days, if the Cosmic Cube has not returned to the hands of S.H.I.E.L.D., then I can only order the razing of the entire Hell's Kitchen. He knew that threatening Chen Yi was useless, so he could only threaten Hell's Kitchen. Chen Yi didn't care when he heard the 3-day deadline given by He Lu Dan. Chen Yi knew that this was just He Lu Dan's last stubbornness, and 3 days was enough. Tony, who was standing by, was relieved to hear that Bucky's body was finally obtained. He had spent so much effort, even going against the government, just to give an explanation to his parents. After calming down, Tony was a little scared and felt that he was a little impulsive. He should use his money power to put pressure on the government or use public opinion to make S.H.I.E.L.D. hand over the body. He was very glad that he had recently developed the artificial intelligence Jarvis, and it was he who informed Chen Yi. He decided to go back and repay Jarvis for enhancing his abilities. Black Braised Egg also made a phone call and ordered his men to bring up the Cosmic Cube and Bucky's body. 5 minutes later, an agent came in with a silver safe and several agents carried a coffin. Chen Yi frowned at the coffin, it was too unlucky. On the contrary, Tony couldn't wait to open the coffin lid to confirm before the agents put down the coffin. Seeing the murderer who killed his parents, Tony became silent for a while. Tony's eyes were filled with anger and sadness. At the same time, Chen Yi also opened the silver safe. Inside the box was a transparent square Rubik's Cube. At first glance, it looked like an ordinary toy. However, Chen Yi knew the true value of this cosmic Rubik's Cube. Chen Yi began to think in his heart, this is the space gem, it looks like an ordinary Rubik's Cube. No wonder it is called the cosmic Rubik's Cube, it really looks like a Rubik's Cube. This can't be a fake. It looks real. It can't be from a cosmic wholesale center in Longguo. Chen Yi found that he couldn't see the difference with his naked eyes. So he closed his eyes and used his observation hockey to feel the cosmic Rubik's Cube. Chen Yi, who used his observation hockey, soon found the difference. The cosmic Rubik's Cube exuded a strong mysterious aura. The black salted egg on the side stared at Chen Yi, trying to peek into the importance of the cosmic Rubik's Cube from the expression on his face. However, Chen Yi just glanced at it and closed the box. Chen Yi confirmed that it was a space gem, and smiled to He Lu Dan. Happy cooperation, if we had cooperated earlier, there wouldn't be so many casualties. I really don't like fighting and killing. Ignoring He Lu Dan's angry expression, he walked to Tony, patted him on the shoulder, and asked, Should we take the coffin with us, or just the body? Tony was silent for a moment, then whispered, just take the body. Chen Yi looked at Bucky's body with disdain, then drew a golden circle with his right hand and opened a portal. Then he used chaos magic to lift Bucky's body and walked through the portal, and Tony followed closely. When they disappeared into the portal, Ludan was completely shocked by the scene in front of him. Because he found that the other end of the portal was the entrance of Good Luck Restaurant. The conspicuous sign made him sure. He couldn't help but start thinking about the limitations and functions of Chen Yi's ability. However, what shocked him even more was yet to come. Just as Ludan was still shocked, Chen Yi's voice suddenly rang in his ears. By the way, I know you were waiting for the return of Captain Marvel, who has been a space policeman. But I regret to tell you that she is not my opponent. After saying this, Chen Yi closed the portal. Ludan was left standing there alone, with shock and fear in his heart. As the portal closed, Steve, who had been unable to move by Chen Yi's chaos magic, also fell from midair to the floor. Steve did not stand up immediately, but pounded the floor with tears in his eyes. He opened his eyes and he watched with his eyes wide open as Bucky's body was taken away by Chen Yi. He didn't expect that Bucky's body would save his life in the end. He hated Fury for handing over Bucky's body. He hated Chen Yi and Tony for taking the body away. But he hated his own incompetence even more. He hated that he didn't protect his best friend's body, and his best friend couldn't even be buried. Steve stood up with all his strength and walked outside. He swore that he would find Bucky's body back. Black Boiled Egg was still immersed in why Chen Yi knew about Carol. Only a few people knew about Carol. But now, Chen Yi mentioned this name lightly, which made Black Boiled Egg doubt whether there was really a spy inside S.H.I.E.L.D. Black Boiled Egg ruled it out first. Impossible. Few people in S.H.I.E.L.D. knew about it, and those who knew about it were probably almost dead. Or Chen Yi had the ability to predict the future. This idea made Black Boiled Egg feel a chill. He knew that every time Chen Yi appeared and every time he showed his ability, they were constantly refreshing their understanding of the world. Fury did not completely believe Chen Yi's contemptuous words, "She is not my opponent." He knew Carol's strength very well, that was a nearly invincible existence. But Chen Yi's ability was also unfathomable, which forced Fury to be cautious. He decided that Carol could not be allowed to face Chen Yi alone no matter what, and he must be fully prepared. On the other side, Chen Yi, who had just returned to the door of the Good Luck Restaurant, asked Tony to take Bucky's body away quickly with great disdain. Tony did not speak, but called Pepper to send someone to pick him up quickly. He also wanted to return to his parents' graves as soon as possible to tell them the good news. Chen Yi watched Tony leave before going upstairs to open the space gem box. When his fingers touched the gem, a look of joy appeared on his face. Sure enough, as he expected, the energy of the space gem had a huge effect on the system. The system sounded in Chen Yi's mind. Ding! A large amount of energy has been detected to be absorbed. The system has automatically turned on absorption. The system will be upgraded within 48 hours. 48 hours. This is twice as fast as the previous system upgrade. The last system upgrade took only 24 hours to update the lottery mode. Could there be something more powerful in 48 hours this time? The old man was very happy. In a hidden office of S.H.I.E.L.D., a figure sat quietly in front of the screen, his eyes fixed on the surveillance screen. With a sly and satisfied smile on his face. This person is the director of S.H.I.E.L.D., Alexander Pierce. Nick Fury, you have come to this day. Pierce whispered to himself, his voice full of pride and ridicule. He was very satisfied that his plan could be implemented so perfectly. He was originally afraid of the abilities of Chen Yi and Nick Fury, but now it seems that they are just pawns in his hands and can be easily controlled by him. He was very satisfied with the success of his plan, and was very happy to see the frustrated performance of his mortal enemy Nick Fury. Pierce was a little afraid of Chen Yi and Nick Fury's abilities before, but he didn't expect that a simple corpse could make them fight. Although Iron Man was a variable in the middle, it was also because of Iron Man that the conflict between Chen Yi and S.H.I.E.L.D. was further aroused. He was very conceited about his wisdom and ability, and thought that both Chen Yi and Nick Fury were just clowns in his plan. What the Lord of Hell, Chen Yi, what Nick Fury is just a clown. Pierce laughed again. Crossbones on the side also came forward and complimented Pierce. "Congratulations, Director. It seems that S.H.I.E.L.D. will only follow your lead after tomorrow." Crossbones knew Pierce's plan very well. He knew that once this handle fell into the hands of Hydra, Nick Fury would no longer be able to serve as the director of S.H.I.E.L.D. He also knew very well that S.H.I.E.L.D. had suffered a serious blow under Nick Fury's leadership, and now this opportunity was just right for Pierce to take over. Pierce seemed to be very pleased with Crossbones' compliments. He nodded slightly, with ambition and greed flashing in his eyes. He seemed to have seen the magnificent scene of himself controlling S.H.I.E.L.D. and spreading their power all over the world. Suddenly, Pierce seemed to remember something, and his brows frowned slightly. Did our agents get hurt in the battle? Although he notified his men to avoid the battle between Iron Man and Captain America at the first time, he still couldn't be completely relieved. He was worried that innocent Hydra agents would be killed or injured in this battle, which were all important chess pieces for him to unify S.H.I.E.L.D. next. Seeing this, Crossbones quickly replied, "Don't worry, Director. Thanks to your wise guidance, all our agents have carried out their missions safely without any injuries. They know your care and will be grateful to you." Hearing this news, Pierce smiled with satisfaction. He nodded and said, "It just so happens that we lost a lot of agents today. These agents have been with me for so many years. It's time to move their positions. I will arrange them to important positions later." Before Nick Fury was there were several important departments that were all Fury's people. It was difficult for Hydra's people to infiltrate. This time is just an opportunity. In this way, they will soon be able to control the entire S.H.I.E.L.D. Soon S.H.I.E.L.D. will become the back garden of their lineage. And they will have a greater say in Hydra. Crossbones was also excited when he heard Pierce's words. He bowed deeply to Pierce and said gratefully, "On behalf of all the agents, I thank you, Director." Pierce waved his hand, his face full of confidence and pride. He took a deep breath and said loudly, "This is all for Hydra. Long live Hydra." Crossbones immediately responded, "Long live Hydra." His voice was full of loyalty and fanaticism. Crossbones and Pierce belong to the same lineage of Hydra. It seems that they can already see their lineage slowly growing in Hydra. Pierce's ambition did not stop there. He planned to infiltrate Hydra's power into every corner of S.H.I.E.L.D. to achieve his control over the entire organization. He knew that this would take time and patience, but he was confident that he could achieve this goal. Because he believed that under the banner of Hydra, their lineage would become stronger and more glorious. At this critical juncture, Crossbones proposed a well-thought-out strategy to Pierce. "I have observed those of the Avengers. Superheroes, I think we should turn our attention to them and try to win over some people. In this way, we may be able to make them our pawns, and even put the entire Avengers under our control." Quote. Pierce heard this, and a gleam of light flashed in his eyes. He knew very well that if he could really control a group of superheroes, then no matter what goal he achieved, it would become easy. He even began to imagine that if everything went well, he might really be able to become the leader of Hydra and realize his long-standing ambition. Pierce has always believed that his ability and wisdom are not inferior to anyone, which is why he can get to where he is today. He remembered that Nick Fury once had similar ideas and successfully brought the Avengers together. Pierce firmly believed that as long as the strategy was right, he could do the same. He began to carefully consider the possibility of this plan. He knew that Hawkeye and Black Widow were Nick Fury's confidants, and it was almost impossible to win them over. Moreover, they were just ordinary people and did not have much value. Captain America is a determined warrior of justice. His position is very clear, and he can't be won over, but he can be used. What happened today is the best example. Just a useless corpse made Captain America used as a gun, causing so much trouble for Nick Fury. However, Pierce noticed the Fantastic Four. They had just joined the Avengers and had not yet fully integrated into it. Moreover, there was no deep sense of loyalty between them and Nick Fury. The reason why they joined the Avengers was more because of the resources and influence of S.H.I.E.L.D. Pierce thought this was a good opportunity. He decided to try to win over the Fantastic Four and make them his pawns. He believed that as long as he promised to let Mr. Fantastic Reed serve as the captain of the Avengers, they would most likely be moved by him. So Pierce said to Crossbones, "Go, invite the Fantastic Four over, and say that I have important things to discuss with them." His eyes were full of confidence and determination, as if he had seen the future of his control over the Avengers. The next day, Chen Yi quietly waited for the system upgrade in the restaurant. He decided to make a pot of fragrant tea for himself first, so that he could enter the health mode and relax his tense nerves. The tea slowly spread in the cup, exuding a faint fragrance. Chen Yi took a sip gently, feeling the smoothness and sweetness of the tea in his mouth. However, his eyes gradually fell into deep thought. Yesterday, the black braised egg threatened him with Hell's Kitchen, which made him realize that he had to be prepared. He recalled that when he only had a restaurant and an apartment at the beginning, he never thought that there would be such a situation. But now, his territory has expanded to the entire Hell's Kitchen, and he must think carefully about how to deal with it. It would be great if we could get a shield technology like the one Wakanda used to surround the entire city. In that case, even if Loki came with Thanos' minions, he could resist the attack. The more Chen Yi thought about it, the more he felt that it was a good idea. After all, Wakanda still had a lot of vibranium. Although Chen Yi didn't need vibranium, it was valuable. However, he also knew that this was not an easy thing to do. Wakanda's technology was their unique secret weapon and would not be easily passed on, but this was also a matter for the future, and Chen Yi was not in a hurry. At most, he would visit them and force them in a friendly way. Wakanda was full of black people, and Chen Yi had no psychological burden at all. However, this was also a matter for the future, and Chen Yi was not in a hurry. He believed that as long as he had enough patience and determination, he would get what he wanted one day. Thinking of this, Chen Yi's mood became cheerful again. He continued to taste the tea in the cup, enjoying the tranquility and serenity. At this moment, a man in a suit and silver-rimmed blind glasses walked into the restaurant. The man walked straight towards Chen Yi, who was drinking tea, and then said to Chen Yi, "Excuse me, can I rent a house here?" Chen Yi, who was drinking tea, was very happy to hear that someone wanted to rent a house. He looked up and said, "Yes, you can rent a house here." But Chen Yi frowned as soon as he looked up at the man with silver-rimmed blind glasses in front of him. Chen Yi thought, "Isn't this blind man Matthew Murdock? Why is there another superhero? His house is almost a gathering place for superheroes. Did this guy have no money to pay the rent and was kicked out?" Chen Yi quickly said, "I rent a house, but I don't want to rent it to you." Matthew heard Chen Yi refused to rent a house, frowned and said, "Why, do you have any requirements for moving in here?" Matthew didn't understand why he was rejected. Matthew came this time to see the new king of Hell's Kitchen, Chen Yi, who is called the Lord of Hell. The second reason is that he was driven out by the original landlord because he was short of money. He had no choice but to come here to try his luck. Chen Yi put down his teacup and replied lightly, "I don't rent to people who can't pay the rent." There was a hint of helplessness and determination in his voice. He already has a lot of people who haven't paid the rent. If this continues, his apartment will be full of homeless people. Matthew was a little embarrassed when he heard Chen Yi's answer, but he quickly regained his composure and explained, "Sir, you may have misunderstood. I am a lawyer, not the kind of person who can't pay the rent." Chen Yi smiled slightly, and his voice revealed an unfathomable feeling. "I know that all lawyers have stable incomes, except you, Matthew Victor. Or should I call you Daredevil?" Matthew took a step back vigilantly when he heard Chen Yi's words. His eyes were full of surprise. "How do you know my identity?" Quote. Matthew was not shocked that Chen Yi knew his name. After all, he had a certain reputation in Hell's Kitchen as a blind lawyer. However, he was very surprised that Chen Yi knew his identity as Daredevil. Daredevil was his secret identity. He often went out at night to fight criminals, including Kingpin's industry. And now, Chen Yi actually knew his secret. Matthew began to worry. Chen Yi was Kingpin's godfather. Would he cause trouble for him? However, Chen Yi did not answer Matthew's question immediately. He just sat quietly on the sofa, looking at Matthew deeply. After a while, he slowly said, "Don't worry, if we really want to cause trouble for you, we would have already done it. You don't think your identity is very mysterious, do you? How many blind people do you think there are in Hell's Kitchen? And this blind person is capable. Then we can find out by investigating." Matthew couldn't help but feel annoyed when he heard this. He always thought that his identity was well hidden, but he didn't expect that it was nothing in the eyes of Chen Yi and others. However, Chen Yi's words did not end. He continued. Not only do I know, but Uncle Jin Bing also knows it, but Uncle Jin Bing was also retiring at the time, and he used your hand to destroy those who wanted to continue to make money. Quote. This sentence shocked Matthew completely. It turned out that all his actions were controlled by others, and his self-righteous independence and freedom turned out to be just a pawn of others. In fact, Chen Yi also admired Matthew in front of him. After crossing, he had almost the same experience as Matthew. Both were born in Hell's Kitchen, were native residents of Hell's Kitchen, were admitted to college, and tried to change the status quo of Hell's Kitchen. The only difference is that Chen Yi has a system and Kingpin's background. Strictly speaking, Chen Yi felt that if he was put in the movie of his previous life, he could not be said to be a decent person, but only a villain who was not so bad. But Matthew, this guy, obviously has all the conditions of a villain. He is blind, lives in a hellish world, has an unhappy life, has been bullied since childhood, and his girlfriend ran away. He became a lawyer and couldn't even pay the rent. Even so, the guy still hopes to change the environment of Hell's Kitchen through his own efforts, and he has the same principle of not killing as Batman. Even if he is a supervillain in the comics, he hopes to judge the other party through the law. This guy is definitely a poor version of Batman, Chen Yi sighed in his heart. Matthew heard Chen Yi's explanation and laughed at himself. I didn't expect that the identity that I always thought was well hidden turned out to be full of mistakes in the eyes of others. Matthew felt a little bitter in his heart, and he understood the gap between himself and Chen Yi. Chen Yi has an excellent mind and a broad vision, and can change the environment of the entire Hell's Kitchen, while he can only struggle in this marginal area. He admitted his failure and accepted the fact that Chen Yi is better than him. Matthew was silent for a while, then sighed deeply. Thank you for your answer, then I should leave and continue to look for a house. There was a hint of helplessness and loss in his voice, and he turned around and prepared to leave. Chen Yi looked at Matthew's dejected back, and still felt a little bit sorry. Chen Yi thought, oh, I am still too kind. Anyway, there are more than one person who has no money to pay, and one more person doesn't matter. Chen Yi said, I changed my mind. I can let you live here for free, but the prerequisite is that you have to become my employee. It was as if he was pointing out a new path for Matthew. When Matthew heard this, he couldn't help but feel a warm current in his heart. At the same time, he looked at Chen Yi in confusion, not understanding what it meant to work for him. The two of them were in a mess, but they were still in a mess. Matthew looked at Chen Yi in confusion and thought, he is trying to recruit me. Doesn't he know that I am not the same kind of people as them? Chen Yi smiled and said to Matthew, although we are not the same kind of people, we all have a common goal, which is to make Hell's Kitchen better, right? There is no conflict. It can be seen from the last time Matthew supported Lao Ma and Master Yi that he is not a stubborn person. As long as he can make Hell's Kitchen, his hometown, better, Matthew will do whatever it takes. Matthew expressed his full agreement. Indeed, if it is for Hell's Kitchen, Matthew is very willing. However, after some thought, Matthew decided to reject Chen Yi's invitation. He raised his head, looked into Chen Yi's eyes, and said firmly, Chen Yi, I am very grateful for your invitation. Your proposal makes me very excited. However, I still want to do it according to my own ideas. I believe that only by using my own way can I truly save those who need help. Matthew's words surprised Chen Yi, but he did not give up. He understood Matthew's persistence and stubbornness, but he also knew Matthew's current situation. He stepped forward, looked into Matthew's eyes, and said seriously, Matthew, I understand your thoughts, but I hope you can look at yourself now. Your life is already a mess, how can you have the energy to save others? You need to take care of yourself first, so that you can better help others. Chen Yi disagreed with Matthew's concept very much. He had the ability to make his life better. He was not doing well, but he still wanted to help others. But in fact, no one would remember Matthew at all. All Matthew did was just to move himself. Matthew was shaken by Chen Yi's words. He smiled helplessly and said, sometimes I really hate my incompetence. Chen Yi, we all want Hell's Kitchen to be better. You have saved the entire Hell's Kitchen. But I haven't changed anything. On the contrary, my life is getting worse and worse. Sometimes, I really hate my ability. I can hear strangers asking for help every night. I can't help but help. I tried my best, but I can't help everyone. Matthew's words revealed a deep sense of powerlessness, as if he had fallen into the abyss of despair and couldn't extricate himself. This sense of powerlessness also made Chen Yi feel a little helpless, but he knew that if Matthew didn't change his mind as soon as possible, he might continue to be depressed and eventually collapse completely. Chen Yi took a deep breath and tried to make his tone sound gentler. Matthew, you are not wrong. You have saved many people, but this is far from enough. You have to change the environment. It's like you saved a demon in hell. The demon will not become an angel because of your rescue. Instead, it will be regarded as a heretic because it is incompatible with other demons. Heretics will be eliminated. Only when you turn hell into heaven can you have a chance to turn all demons into angels. One person can't save everyone. That's why you should join us. Matthew raised his head and looked into Chen Yi's eyes. A gleam of light flashed in his eyes. Chen Yi continued, everyone here is working hard to make Hell's Kitchen better. You can see it yourself. Now Hell's Kitchen is getting better and better. This proves that our direction is right, so you should join us. After listening to Chen Yi's words, Matthew has begun to recognize Chen Yi's words. Recently, he has rarely heard cries for help. On the contrary, he has heard a lot of laughter. Do I really have to continue to make mistakes? Matthew couldn't help thinking in his heart. Chen Yi saw Matthew's hesitation and said quickly, it just so happens that Wanda has taken over Jin Bing's industry and needs a few lawyers. The newly opened school will inevitably have disputes with the government. You can handle these things. It just so happens that you can supervise Jin Bing's industry to see if there are any illegal activities. Isn't that good? Matthew listened to Chen Yi's words, and his inner tremor was like the ripples of a lake blown by the wind. He has always believed that the path he has taken is correct, but now, he began to doubt whether what he has always insisted on is not completely correct. Matthew looked at Chen Yi, who was much younger than him. He didn't expect that in the end, he, a lawyer, didn't understand as well as Chen Yi. This made Matthew feel a little bit. Chen Yi admired this person. He smiled and said to Chen Yi, it would be great if you had appeared in Hell's Kitchen earlier. This sentence showed both appreciation for Chen Yi and regret for his past. Matthew wished that he had lived in Hell's Kitchen managed by Chen Yi when he was born, then perhaps his life would not be as bad as it is now. Chen Yi smiled and said to Matthew, it's not too late now, right? His tone was full of confidence and determination, as if to say that no matter when you start, as long as you have the heart, you can change everything. Matthew was deeply moved by Chen Yi's words, and he felt that his heart began to change. He stretched out his hand and said sincerely, then please give me more advice in the future, boss. I will keep an eye on you to prevent you from becoming the second kingpin. In fact, before coming, Matthew had investigated Chen Yi for a long time. After this conversation, he also knew that Chen Yi was a partner worthy of fighting side by side. Although Matthew joined Chen Yi, he would still protect Hell's Kitchen in his own way. Chen Yi held Matthew's hand, his eyes sparkling. Welcome to join us, of course you can keep staring at me, I won't become kingpin, I will only be Chen Yi. His voice was firm and powerful, as if telling Matthew that he was a trustworthy person who would lead them to a better future. Chen Yi continued to say to Matthew, then I will take you to pick a room first, and then you will report to Wanda tomorrow. Pietro, take this new partner up to pick a room. Chen Yi then called Pietro to take Matthew to familiarize himself with the environment and choose a room. When Pietro took Matthew up the stairs slowly, in the corner of the restaurant, John Wick, a security guard who had been slacking off, couldn't help but come to Chen Yi's side, his face full of confusion and curiosity. Boss, why are you so caring for this blind man? Do you have any special feelings for the blind man? John Wick asked bluntly. The reason why John Wick was so curious was that he happened to witness the conversation between Chen Yi and Matthew while he was making wolfberry tea. He had never seen Chen Yi so patiently persuade others, especially to a blind man he had never met before. This caused strong doubts in his heart. Chen Yi rolled his eyes at John Wick when he heard this question. He frowned slightly and said lightly, I am not interested in men. John Wick was even more confused after hearing this. He asked in confusion, then why did you help him and even invite him to join us? Chen Yi took a deep breath, and his eyes became deep and distant. He spoke slowly, with a hint of imperceptible emotion in his voice. I am just persuading another self. After speaking, he turned and walked straight up the stairs, leaving John Wick standing there alone, like a walker in the fog, completely unable to understand the meaning of Chen Yi's words. Chen Yi added in his heart, another self without a system and background, a self who is obviously living a difficult life but still maintains kindness. The reason why he took such good care of Matthew was not only because Matthew was blind, but also because he saw his own shadow in Matthew. He saw the self without a system and background, the self who still insisted on kindness in a difficult life. The appearance of Matthew was just a small episode for Chen Yi, and Chen Yi was looking forward to the upgrade of the system tomorrow. After all, Chen Yi was a person with a system. He knew the importance of the system and looked forward to the system upgrade to bring him greater convenience and advantages. The next day after settling Daredevil, Chen Yi finally welcomed the system upgrade. Just as Chen Yi was waiting attentively, the system's voice sounded in his mind. Ding! System upgrade successful. Added the latest function, Home System. Hearing this news, Chen Yi was immediately refreshed and couldn't wait to open the Home section interface. However, everything in front of him made him a little confused. The interface was blank, there was nothing. Chen Yi asked, what is the function of this home function? Why is there nothing? Is it the same game as a certain factory? This home used to steal vegetables, Chen Yi thought secretly in his heart. The system seemed to sense Chen Yi's confusion and explained, host, first you need to find a place to locate. After the location is completed, that place will become your home. Chen Yi suddenly realized that he had to choose a suitable place as his home first. He continued to ask curiously, what functions will it have after it becomes my home? The system continued to explain, this home has the function of unlimited space. As long as the host grants permission, your family can return to this home at any time no matter where they are. Chen Yi understood instantly that this is equivalent to a large cross-space lounge and storage room. Chen Yi instantly understood the power of this home system. This is not only a cross-space lounge and storage room, but also an important link between family and friends. Many possibilities emerged in his mind, such as Toby's version of Spider-Man and Harry, the second generation of the Green Goblin, in the Spider-Man universe. They can come to meet and chat with Chen Yi or other family members at any time, and even perform tasks together. Such a scene makes Chen Yi feel both excited and expectant. However, he also knows that this home system is not without limitations. So, he continued to ask, then are there any restrictions on this home system? The system replied, please check it yourself after the host locates the home. Chen Yi nodded, full of curiosity and expectation. Chen Yi immediately replied, then choose the first floor of the restaurant as your home. Chen Yi really couldn't think of any other place. As for the fact that the restaurant should not be open after being used as a home, Chen Yi didn't think much about it. Anyway, he didn't make money from this. Chen Yi really doesn't lack money now. When Chen Yi thought of a large group of fully armed superheroes chatting in the restaurant, and then an ordinary person came in to eat, and then saw a lot of people wearing strange clothes, he would probably be scared away. Or the social cows who are not afraid of death thought that Chen Yi and his group were cosplaying. The system prompted, are you sure about the home address? Chen Yi said very confidently, yes, this is it. The next second, it spread out with Chen Yi as the center and covered the entire restaurant. Ding, the home has been successfully located. Please check it yourself. The system prompted. Wait, can I change my home after the system locates it? Chen Yi suddenly remembered a very important question. Yes, you can relocate it by spending 10 family points. The system replied. Chen Yi was instantly upset when he heard the system's answer. This was too unfair. 10 family points were enough for him to draw 10 times in a row. Chen Yi made up his mind that he would definitely not change the home address. Then Chen Yi saw the home interface and found that he could increase the home space and change the layout and furniture. But he needed to use friend points. Chen Yi cursed secretly. This system really wants friend points. It's forcing me to make friends. He looked at the friend points in his hand and there were more than 200 friend points. He thought for a while and decided to use 20 of them to increase the space of the home. He clicked lightly, and the area of the restaurant instantly expanded by 20 square meters. Since there were not many people in the restaurant at this time, it did not attract the attention of others. Chen Yi saw the extra 20 square meters, and then walked out of the restaurant, and found that there was no difference outside the restaurant, it was still the same as before. That is to say, only the internal space has increased, and the outside looks the same. Chen Yi thought to himself. In this way, the restaurant can open up unlimited space, and then you can even play football and do scientific research in the restaurant. It's not a loss, 1 point of friendship value for 1 square meter. At least not 1 foot, Chen Yi said secretly. The general measurement unit in the Big Apple City is feet, and 1 foot is less than 1 square meter. If it is really feet, Chen Yi will lose a lot. Next, Chen Yi continued to check the interface of the home and found that people from other parallel universes can only stay in the home and cannot leave the home range. And the external area of this home is fixed and cannot be upgraded. If he wants family members from other parallel universes to come over, he can only use exclusive skills on your right. However, the only point that makes Chen Yi more satisfied with this function is that the family members authorized by him can return to the home anytime and anywhere. That is, if any family member is attacked, it can be teleported to the home immediately. This means that with this function, Chen Yi no longer has to worry about the safety of his friends. That's it. Absorb the energy of the space gem and then that's it. Is it the space gem that is too bad, or the system that is too bad? Chen Yi complained after reading the introduction of the home. Originally, Chen Yi was looking forward to this upgrade. Although the home section is not bad, it is far worse than the lottery. While Chen Yi was mumbling, he clicked on other interfaces, hoping to find some surprises elsewhere. Suddenly, his eyes lit up and he found a new skill. A movable LV1. Form a protective shield within 100 kilometers of the home, 10,000 10,000ths. This protective shield skill is exactly what Chen Yi needs. As long as he has this skill, Chen Yi no longer needs to worry about the safety of Hell's Kitchen. System, how do you replenish the energy of this protective shield? Chen Yi asked curiously. Automatically restore 100 points every 24 hours, or absorb the energy of the space gem to speed up twice the speed. The system replied. After listening to the system's explanation, Chen Yi made a decision. It seems that this space gem can't be returned to Black Sauce Egg. He has always been a man who keeps his promises, but this time, he may have to break his promise. After all, this protective shield is too important to him. After browsing all the upgrade contents, Chen Yi plans to authorize all his family members and then summon them over. He wants them to know that there is such a magical function, and he also wants to take this opportunity to get everyone together and get to know each other. Speaking of which, Chen Yi has never had all his family members have a meal together. This time can make up for this regret and give everyone a chance to get familiar with each other. Maybe in different universes, there can be a big exchange of materials and a cross-time and space transaction. It's time for a big party, Chen Yi said with anticipation. The next day after settling Daredevil, Chen Yi finally welcomed the system upgrade. Just as Chen Yi was waiting attentively, the system's voice sounded in his mind. Ding! System upgrade successful. Added the latest function, Home System. Hearing this news, Chen Yi was immediately refreshed and couldn't wait to open the Home section interface. However, everything in front of him made him a little confused. The interface was blank, there was nothing. Chen Yi asked, what is the function of this home function? Why is there nothing? Is it the same game as a certain factory? This home used to steal vegetables, Chen Yi thought secretly in his heart. The system seemed to sense Chen Yi's confusion and explained, host, first you need to find a place to locate. After the location is completed, that place will become your home. Chen Yi suddenly realized that he had to choose a suitable place as his home first. He continued to ask curiously, what functions will it have after it becomes my home? The system continued to explain, this home has the function of unlimited space. As long as the host grants permission, your family can return to this home at any time no matter where they are. Chen Yi understood instantly that this is equivalent to a large cross-space lounge and storage room. Chen Yi instantly understood the power of this home system. This is not only a cross-space lounge and storage room, but also an important link between family and friends. Many possibilities emerged in his mind, such as Tobey's version of Spider-Man and Harry, the second generation of the Green Goblin, in the Spider-Man universe. They can come to meet and chat with Chen-Yi or other family members at any time, and even perform tasks together. Such a scene makes Chen-Yi feel both excited and expectant. However, he also knows that this home system is not without limitations. So, he continued to ask, then are there any restrictions on this home system? The system replied, please check it yourself after the host locates the home. Chen-Yi nodded, full of curiosity and expectation. Chen-Yi immediately replied, then choose the first floor of the restaurant as your home. Chen-Yi really couldn't think of any other place. As for the fact that the restaurant should not be open after being used as a home, Chen-Yi didn't think much about it. Anyway, he didn't make money from this. Chen-Yi really doesn't lack money now. When Chen-Yi thought of a large group of fully armed superheroes chatting in the restaurant, and then an ordinary person came in to eat, and then saw a lot of people wearing strange clothes, he would probably be scared away. Or the social cows who are not afraid of death thought that Chen-Yi and his group were cosplaying. The system prompted, are you sure about the home address? Chen-Yi said very confidently, yes, this is it. The next second, it spread out with Chen-Yi as the center and covered the entire restaurant. Ding, the home has been successfully located. Please check it yourself. The system prompted. Wait, can I change my home after the system locates it? Chen-Yi suddenly remembered a very important question. Yes, you can relocate it by spending 10 family points. The system replied. Chen-Yi was instantly upset when he heard the system's answer. This was too unfair. 10 family points were enough for him to draw 10 times in a row. Chen-Yi made up his mind that he would definitely not change the home address. Then Chen-Yi saw the home interface and found that he could increase the home space and change the layout and furniture. But he needed to use friend points. Chen-Yi cursed secretly. This system really wants friend points. It's forcing me to make friends. He looked at the friend points in his hand and there were more than 200 friend points. He thought for a while and decided to use 20 of them to increase the space of the home. He clicked lightly, and the area of the restaurant instantly expanded by 20 square meters. Since there were not many people in the restaurant at this time, it did not attract the attention of others. Chen-Yi saw the extra 20 square meters, and then walked out of the restaurant, and found that there was no difference outside the restaurant, it was still the same as before. That is to say, only the internal space has increased, and the outside looks the same. Chen-Yi thought to himself. In this way, the restaurant can open up unlimited space, and then you can even play football and do scientific research in the restaurant. It's not a loss, 1 point of friendship value for 1 square meter. At least not 1 foot, Chen-Yi said secretly. The general measurement unit in the Big Apple City is feet, and 1 foot is less than 1 square meter. If it is really feet, Chen-Yi will lose a lot. Next, Chen-Yi continued to check the interface of the home and found that people from other parallel universes can only stay in the home and cannot leave the home range. And the external area of this home is fixed and cannot be upgraded. If he wants family members from other parallel universes to come over, he can only use exclusive skills on your right. However, the only point that makes Chen-Yi more satisfied with this function is that the family members authorized by him can return to the home anytime and anywhere. That is, if any family member is attacked, it can be teleported to the home immediately. This means that with this function, Chen-Yi no longer has to worry about the safety of his friends. That's it. Absorb the energy of the space gem and then that's it. Is it the space gem that is too bad, or the system that is too bad? Chen-Yi complained after reading the introduction of the home. Originally, Chen-Yi was looking forward to this upgrade. Although the home section is not bad, it is far worse than the lottery. While Chen-Yi was mumbling, he clicked on other interfaces, hoping to find some surprises elsewhere. Suddenly, his eyes lit up and he found a new skill. A movable LV1. Form a protective shield within 100 kilometers of the home, 10,000 10,000ths. This protective shield skill is exactly what Chen-Yi needs. As long as he has this skill, Chen-Yi no longer needs to worry about the safety of Hell's Kitchen. System, how do you replenish the energy of this protective shield? Chen-Yi asked curiously. Automatically restore 100 points every 24 hours, or absorb the energy of the space gem to speed up twice the speed. The system replied. After listening to the system's explanation, Chen Yi made a decision. It seems that this space gem can't be returned to Black Sauce Egg. He has always been a man who keeps his promises, but this time, he may have to break his promise. After all, this protective shield is too important to him. After browsing all the upgrade contents, Chen Yi plans to authorize all his family members and then summon them over. He wants them to know that there is such a magical function, and he also wants to take this opportunity to get everyone together and get to know each other. Speaking of which, Chen Yi has never had all his family members have a meal together. This time can make up for this regret and give everyone a chance to get familiar with each other. Maybe in different universes, there can be a big exchange of materials and a cross-time and space transaction. It's time for a big party, Chen Yi said with anticipation. Chen Yi quickly authorized all his family members to return home. The next second, a voice was heard in the minds of Chen Yi's family members. Chen Yi has authorized you to return home. Do you need to be teleported to your home? Wanda, who was in a meeting at this time, heard the voice in her mind, stood up immediately, and rushed out of the meeting room. The only thing Wanda heard in this sentence was the word Chen Yi. What happened to Chen Yi? Is he in danger? Wanda thought secretly in her heart. As soon as she heard the news about Chen Yi, she didn't care why this voice appeared in her mind, and directly used chaos magic to fly towards the restaurant. On the other side, the Jin Bing couple also heard the voice from the system in their minds, and they were about to go out at this time. After hearing this voice, Vanessa looked at Jin Bing with fear and confusion and said, "Husband, did you hear a voice saying that Chen Yi invited me to some home?" Vanessa, an ordinary person, suddenly heard a voice in her mind, and naturally she was a little scared. But Jin Bing gave her a lot of security by her side, so she asked her husband as soon as possible. "I heard it too, don't be afraid, don't worry. Let's go shopping first and then go to the brat's house to see," Jin Bing comforted. Jin Bing naturally heard the voice of the system, but he didn't care too much or be afraid. After all, he was also a person who had experienced great storms. In addition, he trusted Chen Yi very much, and Chen Yi would come up with some strange things every now and then, and Jin Bing was not surprised at all now. In parallel universes, there are fruits that give superpowers, and it is estimated that even if Chen Yi suddenly has a child, he would not be surprised. On the other side, Tony, who had just finished paying tribute to his parents and strengthened his armor at home, naturally heard this voice, and he stopped the work at hand. Then he asked the AI Jarvis vigilantly, "Jarvis, did you hear Chen Yi calling me?" Jarvis replied, "Sir, there is no one at home today, and there is no possibility of any sound." Tony looked around vigilantly and confirmed that there was no one around. But he did hear a mechanical voice. Tony ordered Jarvis worriedly, "Jarvis, turn on the home surveillance and the infrared thermal imager." He turned on the infrared thermal imager because he was worried that someone would run into his home invisibly. Even if a person was invisible, the heat emitted by his body could not escape the scanning of the infrared thermal imager. Since he had seen various mutants, he had been constantly upgrading his equipment to improve his safety. When Tony looked around carefully and found that no one had come to his home, Tony relaxed. Seeing Tony go to such great lengths to check, Jarvis kindly comforted him. "According to the system analysis, there is a 33% probability that you are tired, so you have auditory hallucinations, 67% probability that you may be thinking about Mr. Chen Yi. We have automatically dialed Mr. Chen Yi for you," Jarvis said considerately. "Shut up, Jarvis. Hang up the phone." Tony hurriedly stopped him. At this time, Tony didn't care about the voice that just flashed through his mind, and frowned at Jarvis. Does Jarvis already have his own feelings and thoughts? Tony thought and prepared to check Jarvis. Just as Tony was about to check, he remembered the voice again in his mind. "Your authorization has been approved. Do you need to be teleported back to home?" At this moment, Tony finally confirmed that he was not hallucinating. What is home? What is Chen Yi doing? Forget it, I'd better go directly to him and ask him clearly, Tony thought secretly in his heart. Every time he saw Chen Yi always brought new shocks to Tony, so he denied the usefulness of science more than once. He ignored the voice, put on the iron armor and flew towards Chen Yi. Toby's Spider-Man parallel universe. At this time, Harry and Toby's version of Peter had graduated from high school and had been training together during the holidays. I received an invitation from my master. Toby's version of Peter spoke first, his voice full of expectation and excitement. I also received an invitation from Mr. Chen Yi, Harry said excitedly, his eyes flashing with expectation. The two said their invitations at the same time and looked at each other in surprise. Toby's version of Peter thought that he was the only one who received the invitation. He felt a little disappointed at this moment, but he was more happy. He knew how exciting it was to go to this mysterious place with his friends. They smiled at each other, and Toby's version of Peter suggested, "Then let's go directly." However, Harry stopped him, and his eyes revealed caution and thoughtfulness. "Don't worry, let's go back and ask my master first. After all, my master knows Mr. Chen Yi better. What if this is a trap?" Harry was still very cautious, unlike his master Deadpool. Harry's words calmed Toby's version of Peter, and he nodded and agreed to Harry's proposal. The two soon came to the swimming pool, where Deadpool was playing with several beautiful women. From Deadpool's expression, it can be seen that he enjoyed it very much. Harry first shouted to Deadpool by the pool, "Master, we have something to talk to you about." Deadpool heard the voice and turned to see that it was Harry and Toby's version of Peter. The smile on his face gradually disappeared, replaced by a hint of reluctance. But he still got up and walked towards the pool, and before leaving, he did not forget to kiss the girl next door twice. "What do you want to talk to me about? Don't you see that your great Deadpool is busy?" Deadpool said to Harry dissatisfiedly. "Master, did you hear a voice in your mind saying that Mr. Chen Yi invited us to a homeland?" Harry said without caring about Deadpool's attitude. "I heard it. Why do you two want to go?" Deadpool said indifferently. Deadpool had been summoned by Chen Yi once before, so he was not unfamiliar with the voice of the system in his mind, and was not surprised at all. Hearing Deadpool's affirmative answer, Harry and Toby's version of Peter breathed a sigh of relief, and then the two looked at each other happily. "Then let's go quickly, Master. Mr. Chen Yi will look for us later," Harry said happily. He couldn't wait to meet Mr. Chen Yi. He had too many words to thank him and wanted Mr. Chen Yi to see his strength after special training. No, I won't go back. I have everything I want here. I don't want to go back and live a hard life with Chen Yi," Deadpool quickly refused. As soon as he thought that he might be exploited by Chen Yi, Deadpool didn't want to go back. He had a very comfortable life during this period. Since Chen Yi put him here, Harry treated him with good food, good drinks and good girls every day. This made Deadpool, who was always thick-skinned, a little embarrassed, so he taught Harry some fighting skills. Harry also regarded Deadpool as his master. "No, Master, let's go together," Harry said. Deadpool quickly shook his head and turned around to go back to the swimming pool to play with the beautiful girl. Harry quickly pulled Deadpool and said to the system in his mind, "Teleport, take my master with you." He didn't know whether the system would agree, but he tried it anyway. The next second, a voice came from Deadpool's mind, "It is detected that other family members agree to teleport on your behalf." Then, Deadpool and Harry disappeared in an instant. The beauties by the swimming pool saw this scene and looked at each other, not knowing what happened. Only Deadpool's wailing echoed in the air, "No, I don't want to go back. I will come back." The next day, the police officer was arrested. Chen Yi didn't know at this time that his authorization had caused a lot of trouble for the people around him. Chen Yi also asked the system in his mind, "After they come here, where will they go when they return? And how will they come next time if they want to come?" "They only need to silently say leave home, and they can leave directly, and they will return to the original place after leaving," the system replied. "Next time they only need to silently say return home, and they can come back." The system continued to add. After listening to this, Chen Yi thought secretly in his heart, "This thing is quite convenient, but when the restaurant appears inexplicably, people will appear, which is also very scary." Thinking of this, Chen Yi planned to say hello to Aunt May, otherwise he was afraid that she would be scared. Before Chen Yi greeted them, people were teleported in one after another. The first person to teleport was John Wick, the security guard sitting at the door. He looked around speechlessly, everything was still so familiar, and then he asked Chen Yi lazily, "So this home is the restaurant? What's going on?" It turned out that his teleportation was from the door to the inside, teleporting to nothing. Chen Yi looked at John's confused expression and couldn't help laughing. Understand that this teleportation skill is really not very useful for John, or even useless. However, Chen Yi did not explain immediately, because he planned to wait until everyone was present and then explain it all at once. In this way, it would save everyone from having to explain it separately. Wait for the others first, I will explain it slowly when the time comes. The second person to arrive surprised Chen Yi. This was someone he didn't expect, and it was Matthew, the daredevil who had just joined yesterday. When did this blind man become my family? Why didn't I know? Chen Yi hurriedly checked the system and saw the time prompted by the system. He realized that when Matthew became a family member, the system was upgrading, so there was no reminder. Matthew looked at the unfamiliar environment around him, and his heart was full of doubts and shock. He never thought that Chen Yi had such a magical ability that he could summon him here at any time. This made him deeply in awe and admire Chen Yi. Is this the method of the Lord of Hell? Is this the power that Chen Yi gave me? Matthew thought to himself. At the same time, he was also glad that he made the right choice and joined Chen Yi's team. After all, if Chen Yi, who has such a powerful ability, wants to destroy him, it is easy. Seeing Matthew with a vigilant and puzzled look, Chen Yi introduced John to the side. This is our new partner, family member Matthew, also the famous daredevil in Hell's Kitchen. Both of you are called Daredevil. Let's have a good chat. John glanced at Matthew lazily and said, "Hello, I am John, also called Daredevil. I am the security guard of the apartment here now. You can find me if you have any problems in the apartment." Matthew nodded, and the two taciturn people were silent for a while. Chen Yi was about to break the awkwardness, and suddenly three people were teleported over. It was the parallel universe Deadpool, Harry and Toby version of Peter. Master, Mr. Chen Yi. Harry and Toby version of Peter greeted Chen Yi again at the same time, and Chen Yi was very happy to see them. Then he looked around curiously, and Toby Peter thought, is this where Mr. Chen Yi lives? It seems very warm. Harry, on the contrary, saw the decoration of the Good Luck restaurant and thought, Mr. Chen Yi doesn't seem to be living well here. This is too bad. Is Mr. Chen Yi short of money? I should have brought more money earlier. The only unhappy person might be Deadpool, who is currently lying on the ground. Chen Yi first walked to Deadpool, who was lying on the ground with his head in his hand and looked hopeless, and said, I was wondering why Hell's Kitchen has been quiet recently. It turns out that someone is not here. Chen Yi would never admit that he forgot to summon Deadpool back after he came back. I want to go back. This is no longer my home. I have found my real home. Deadpool said. Chen Yi knew that Deadpool was living a very comfortable life there when he saw that he was so happy. He didn't need to think about it to know that it must be Harry who did it. Peter, the poor guy, couldn't have done it. Chen Yi warned Harry, don't spend so much money again when you go back. Give it to Deadpool. After all, this is the money left by your father. It's not easy to make money. Quote. Harry nodded awkwardly, not daring to refute. In fact, he wanted to say that he could not spend all his money even if he spent it in his next life. Harry also knew that Chen Yi was concerned about him. However, when Deadpool heard what Chen Yi said, he immediately refused. He walked up to Harry arrogantly, hugged him and said to Chen Yi, why? I am Harry's master now, and it is natural for the apprentice to spend money for the master. After saying that, he smiled at Harry proudly, as if saying, I am right. Quote. Harry felt a little uncomfortable being hugged by Deadpool. He secretly glanced at Chen Yi, but found that Chen Yi was not angry. Harry was a little fidgety at this time. He didn't know which side he should stand on. Although Deadpool was a little mean at ordinary times, he was his master after all, and Chen Yi was his savior. Deadpool looked at Chen Yi with an arrogant expression, and before Chen Yi could make a move. Just then, a powerful magical energy suddenly descended, and instantly threw Deadpool against the wall. It turned out that Wanda came back in time and subdued Deadpool with chaos magic. She looked at Chen Yi with worry on her face. Are you okay? I heard a voice and thought something happened to you. Chen Yi looked at Wanda, who was worried and nervous, and felt warm in his heart. He quickly comforted her. I'm fine, don't be so nervous to come back to see me. Quote. Harry and Toby Peter, who were standing by, saw this beautiful woman walking towards Chen Yi, and they couldn't help but look at each other, and they all felt the taste of gossip. They secretly guessed in their hearts, could this be the master's wife? John saw the boss's wife and the boss being affectionate at this time, and immediately played his role, and quickly pulled Harry and Toby Peter, who wanted to eat melons, to visit. At this time, Chen Yi was listening attentively to Wanda telling about the recent things, and their conversation was affectionate and sincere. At the same time, other family members were also teleported into the restaurant one after another. Like Dr. Octopus and Sandman, their arrival made the restaurant more lively. Except for Kingpin's family, almost all family members were present. As time went on, the seats in the restaurant were gradually occupied by family members. Everyone chatted with people they knew, waiting for Chen Yi answered their questions. For example, Tony talked with Dr. Octopus about the possibilities of technology in Mecha, and Master Yi shared his martial arts experience and life experience in Hell's Kitchen with Daredevil, who was also blind. Sandman and Punisher were discussing school matters in a corner. Their voices were sometimes high-pitched and sometimes low, but they were always full of enthusiasm and concern. The whole scene was lively and harmonious, full of family warmth. Chen Yi looked at all this, and his heart was full of pride and satisfaction. He was also ready to start explaining everyone's doubts and the role of home. Chapter 71. After 10 minutes, Chen Yi finished explaining the functions of the home to all his family members. He cleverly avoided the real situation of the system's existence, and attributed all the seemingly unscientific things to the cosmic cube. Although such an explanation was somewhat mysterious, the people present had to accept it. For those members who had just met Chen Yi, such as Harry and Toby's Spider-Man, they were shocked by the magic and absurdity of the home function. They widened their eyes, as if they couldn't believe their ears. They looked at Chen Yi, as if asking, is this true? Are we dreaming? And for those scientifically rigorous family members, such as Dr. Octopus and Tony, they frowned and fell into deep thought. They were trying to understand the principles behind these functions and wanted to find a scientific explanation. However, they also knew that the existence of these functions was beyond their current knowledge. Tony felt a little wary and helpless. Chen Yi was becoming more and more incomprehensible and powerful. If he used this ability to do bad things, no one could stop him. Tony could only keep an eye on Chen Yi and not let him have the chance to become bad. For those family members who had been with Chen Yi for a long time, such as Wanda and Pietro, although they were also surprised, they seemed to have gotten used to the magic brought by Chen Yi. They knew that Chen Yi could always bring them surprises, and this time's home was just one of them. At this moment, Deadpool played on the spot. He disappeared from Chen Yi's sight, and then appeared again, each time in a different posture. After repeating several times, Chen Yi had to warn him with a cold face, I forgot to tell you that I can turn off this permission. If someone wants to play around, don't blame me for turning off the permission. Chen Yi's warning worked, and Deadpool became much quieter. But Deadpool secretly thought in his heart, with this function, I can go to Katyusha's house anytime and anywhere. If her husband comes back, I can use this function to come back, and then I can go back after her husband leaves. This is simply a magic weapon for picking up girls. No, I'm not that kind of person. Lord Deadpool never does anything sneaky. Deadpool shook his head and rejected this plan in his heart. Chen Yi further explained, this function is mainly for the convenience of family members in parallel universes and family members in danger. For people who often stay in Hell's Kitchen, it is actually not very useful. There was a hint of helplessness in his words, but more of it was the care and protection for his family. At this time, Tony couldn't help asking Chen Yi, so, you knew the ability of this cosmic cube from the beginning. Then what exactly is this cosmic cube? There shouldn't be such an item on Earth. Tony's words were full of surprise and curiosity. Tony thought Chen Yi was for his tough attitude at all costs in S.H.I.E.L.D., but it turned out to be for the cosmic cube in front of him, which made him moved in vain. Tony has slowly begun to adapt to Chen Yi's omniscience, but as a scientific researcher, he has begun to be interested in the cosmic cube. Chen Yi had expected Tony to ask questions today. After all, among his friends, Tony is the only one who likes to ask questions. It happened that everyone was present today, so Chen Yi thought he might as well give everyone a general introduction to the 6 Infinity Stones. Thinking of this, he gently placed the cosmic cube on the table, which immediately attracted everyone's attention. They gathered around curiously, their eyes full of desire for this transparent little Rubik's Cube. Toby's version of Peter's eyes were particularly eager, and Chen Yi saw that he wanted to touch the cosmic cube. Just when Chen Yi was about to allow Toby's version of Peter to touch the cosmic cube, Deadpool suddenly reached out and picked it up. He carefully placed the transparent cosmic cube in front of his eyes, trying to find the difference between it and the ordinary Rubik's Cube. His actions surprised everyone else, and Chen Yi looked at him helplessly. Ignoring the gazes of others and Chen Yi's eyes that wanted to knife someone, Deadpool carefully observed the cosmic cube for a while. When he found that he could not see the special features of this cosmic cube, he took a bite unwillingly. However, he soon found that this cosmic cube was extremely hard and could not be bitten. So, he looked at the cosmic cube with disdain, and then casually threw it back on the table. Seeing this scene, Harry's face showed an awkward smile. He covered his face, as if he wanted to deny that he had any relationship with this mean master. Chen Yi also explained at this time, in fact, strictly speaking, the real name of this cosmic cube is the Space Gem. It is one of the 6 infinite gems. Infinity Gem. Deadpool frowned, as if trying to recall something. I seem to have heard this name somewhere. Tony looked at Chen Yi in shock. He was extremely sensitive to numbers. At this moment, he couldn't imagine that there were 5 gems similar to this space gem. He asked curiously, 6. Do you mean there are 5 other infinite gems in the universe? Space gem. Everyone exchanged puzzled glances. Most of them heard this term for the first time. Chen Yi nodded, and everyone's eyes were focused on him, waiting for him to continue explaining. He took a deep breath and began to tell the story about the Infinity Stones. Yes, in addition to the Space Stone, there are also the Time Stone, the Reality Stone, the Soul Stone, the Power Stone, and the Mind Stone. These 6 stones each have different powers, but each has the ability to change the universe. It is said that if you collect all 6 stones, you can summon the dragon. Chen Yi unconsciously mentioned the Dragon Ball in his previous life. That's wrong. It is said that if you collect all 6 stones, you can make any wish. Chen Yi concluded. Everyone was stunned. This was the first time they heard of this thing. Toby's version of Peter whispered at this moment, what are the powers of these stones? Don't worry, I will tell you one by one, Chen Yi said. At the same time, when Chen Yi was explaining the abilities of the 6 Infinity Stones to everyone. On the other side of the Earth, in the headquarters of S.H.I.E.L.D., Nick Fury, the director who was always known for his calmness, was smiling at a lady in a red and blue uniform with flowing blonde hair. The lady had a firm gaze and a calm pace. She exuded an indescribable heroic spirit and valiantness, as if she was a hero returning from the battlefield. Carol, welcome home. Black Boiled Egg walked up and said sincerely. Black Boiled Egg was full of joy and expectation. His biggest secret weapon, Captain Marvel, was finally back. With her and the Avengers, they could finally suppress all unstable factors. Captain Marvel. Carol smiled back, with a firm light in her eyes. I'm back, where is the danger? Her voice was full of confidence and determination, as if no matter what danger she faced, she could stand up and protect the peace of the Earth and the universe. The 2 of them were very close, and the 2 of them were very close. Black Boiled Egg didn't expect Carol to be so anxious. He wanted to carry out the mission right after returning to Earth. Don't worry about it. Take a break and adjust to the best state. I'll take you to know my newly formed Avengers Alliance and tell you about my plan. Black Boiled Egg refused. Carol frowned. She certainly understood what Nick Fury meant, but the anxiety in her heart was hard to calm down. She knew that there were still a lot of things outside the Earth that she needed to deal with, and she couldn't stay here for long. She was eager to solve the crisis on Earth and return to the universe to continue to be his space police. Black Boiled Egg saw Carol's reluctance and comforted her. Don't worry, you finally came back, you should rest for a few days and take a look at your hometown. You haven't eaten yet, I'll treat you, and you can just tell me about your experiences in the universe. She knew that this old friend was concerned about her and hoped that she could get a moment of peace here. Carol couldn't refute it, nodded and followed Nick Fury away. Black Boiled Egg was thinking while taking Carol away. Even if Carol's secret trump card came back, Black Boiled Egg didn't care about Chen Yi at all. It's not that Black Boiled Egg is not confident in Carol's strength, but what happened in S.H.I.E.L.D. a few days ago made Black Boiled Egg more vigilant about Chen Yi. Black Boiled Egg is very wary of Chen Yi, and strictly speaking, there is no hatred between them. Black Boiled Egg just thinks that Chen Yi and his Hell's Kitchen are unstable factors. They are uncontrollable to the people of the federal government and ordinary people like them, but if Chen Yi can be obedient, then he and his forces will be a force that cannot be ignored. Even though his position as the director of S.H.I.E.L.D. is about to be taken down because of Chen Yi's disturbance at S.H.I.E.L.D. a few days ago, Black Boiled Egg does not hate Chen Yi. As long as Chen Yi can join the Avengers, then Chen Yi's disturbance at S.H.I.E.L.D. and the previous hatred of Captain America are insignificant in the face of protecting the safety of the Earth. This time when Carol comes back, Black Boiled Egg plans to find Chen Yi again to see if he is willing to join the Avengers. If Chen Yi refuses again, Black Boiled Egg can only do his best to kill Chen Yi and his forces. Black Boiled Egg has no other choice. Only by killing Chen Yi or winning over Chen Yi can he keep his position as the director of S.H.I.E.L.D. Carol looked at the black salted egg, who suddenly stopped, frowned slightly, and asked in confusion, "What's wrong?" "Stop suddenly." She looked around, vigilantly looking for possible enemies, but she didn't feel any hostility. The black salted egg looked up at the gloomy sky and said lightly, "It's going to rain." Then he continued to walk forward, leaving Carol slightly stunned. Carol looked at the sky carefully and thought, "It doesn't look like it's going to rain. It was fine when I flew back." Then he quickly followed. On the other side, Chen Yi also explained the origin and function of the 6 infinite gems. Everyone was fascinated by what they heard. They imagined themselves becoming invincible, mastering the power of the universe, and reaching the pinnacle of life. This imagination made their heartbeats accelerate and their blood boil. Among them, Deadpool's reaction was the most enthusiastic. He hugged Chen Yi's thighs tightly, as if he saw the road to his dream. His eyes flashed with crazy light, and he asked eagerly, "My dear Mr. Chen Yi, you must know where the Mind Stone is, tell me quickly. I want to get it." After hearing about the 6 infinite gems, Deadpool fell in love with the Mind Stone at first sight. Deadpool thought in his heart, "With the Mind Stone, you can have any beauty you want. But too many beauties will be too much, 1 beauty per hour, and there are only 24 in a day. It seems that I have to learn time management well. If it doesn't work, we can go together." Thinking of this, Deadpool drooled unconsciously, and the saliva dripped onto Chen Yi's thigh. Chen Yi felt a dampness, and he kicked Deadpool away with disgust. Although Deadpool did not speak, Chen Yi knew clearly what he was thinking. Wanda and Pietro were even thinking in their hearts that if they had the Time Stone, could they save their adoptive parents. But they did not ask Chen Yi, because they knew that if Chen Yi had this, if they have this ability or this gem, they will definitely give it to them. What Chen Yi did not say was that the Time Gem could not save their adoptive parents. Instead, Harry, who had lost his father, could not wait to ask Chen Yi, "Sir, do you know where the Time Gem is? If you have the Time Gem, can you save my father?" After Harry said this, many people who had lost their loved ones looked at Chen Yi expectantly, such as Sandman, who lost his daughter, John Wick and Dr. Octopus, who lost their wives, and Tony, who lost his parents. Chen Yi frowned, then shook his head and replied, "First, I really know where the Time Gem is. It is in the hands of a person, and I may not be able to beat that person. He himself may not be able to beat the Ancient One. After all, the Ancient One is too unfathomable. Second, the Time Gem cannot save your father. This is a bit complicated to explain. In short, you can go back to the past to save your father, but when you return to your own world, your father is not there." Then Chen Yi gave them questions about the time and space paradox. "Third, Harry, the universe you are in may be different from our universe. I'm not sure if you have Infinity Stones there. Of course, you can also try to find them." Chen Yi really didn't know if there were Infinity Stones in Tobey's Spider-Man universe, because there was neither the Ancient One nor other superheroes there. Tony started to think and asked Chen Yi, "Are there really only 6 Infinity Stones? Is there a 7th one?" Chen Yi didn't expect Tony to ask such a question, and looked at Tony pitifully. Tony looked at Chen Yi's pitiful eyes and felt very puzzled. Chen Yi thought, "Of course there is a 7th knowledge stone, maybe it's in your head." But before Chen Yi could say it, suddenly, Chen Yi seemed to notice something and stood up. He said loudly to everyone, "Okay, let's stop here for today's questions. We should also prepare for dinner. Let's get to know each other." In the future, we will be comrades fighting side by side. I'll go upstairs first. Everyone looked at Chen Yi's hurriedly leaving back. Although their hearts were full of curiosity and doubts, they didn't say anything more. They began to communicate with each other and enhance their understanding of each other. Chen Yi returned to his room, opened the door, and found a bald man sitting in the room. It was Master Ji Yuyi. Chen Yi was not surprised by Master Ji Yuyi's arrival, because he had just sensed the strange power fluctuations, which were the unique magical aura of Master Ji Yuyi. He was just a little curious about why Master Ji Yuyi came here. Chen Yi smiled at Master Ji Yuyi and asked, Master Ji Yuyi, you came here today, is there something important? The two of them were in a mess. It's illegal to break into a private house, Master Ji Yuyi, can't you just walk in through the front door? In the spacious living room, Chen Yi looked helplessly at Master Ji Yuyi, who suddenly appeared in front of him, while picking up the tea set and starting to make tea. Good fellow, the first time at least it was at the door of the restaurant, this time it was teleported directly into my house. You can do whatever you want with a teleportation portal. What if I do something private and Ji Yuyi suddenly comes in, how embarrassing it will be. Chen Yi complained in his heart. Master Ji Yuyi seemed to see Chen Yi's complaint. She smiled and said, I have informed you. You should be the most sensitive person to spatial fluctuations now. Didn't you go upstairs as soon as possible? Hearing Master Ji Yuyi's words, Chen Yi paused while making tea and thought to himself. Forget about this old bald guy. Don't forget that Master Ji Yuyi can read minds. No, I remember that I have Deadpool skills and can be immune to any attacks from the mind. Master Ji Yuyi seemed to see through Chen Yi's thoughts. She smiled and shook her head. Don't worry, I can't read your mind. I can't read the minds of many of you. I don't know how you gathered them together. Chen Yi didn't believe Ji Yuyi's words at all. She also said that she couldn't read minds. Isn't this the answer? But Chen Yi is still very confident in his system and his own abilities. He put down the tea set in his hand, sat opposite Master Ji Yuyi, and joked, we are just a group of not so bad guys who are huddled together for warmth. The reason why we are together may be because I can provide food and accommodation. Chen Yi didn't know whether it was because of the system or himself, but he felt that there were indeed more and more friends around him. From the beginning, there were only him and Deadpool, and now there are a group of people with various abilities. Perhaps it is because there is a special atmosphere here that makes them feel safe and comfortable. Chen Yi joked in his heart, I am still too soft-hearted. If I charge them rent and food expenses, I guess there may not be so many people. He smiled and shook his head, as if he felt a little funny about his own thoughts. Master Ji Yuyi looked at Chen Yi's expression, and a trace of appreciation flashed in his eyes. He knew that although this young man always said that he was not a good person, he was actually full of kindness and justice in his heart. This is also one of the reasons why he chose to cooperate with Chen Yi. Maybe this is fate. I'm old. Maybe my previous idea was wrong. It might be a good idea for Strange to follow Chen Yi. Master Ji Yuyi said silently in his heart. She believed that this group of people would definitely create their own era when they gathered together. I didn't expect you to have the Infinity Stones. It seems that you have mastered the power of the Space Stones. Master Ji Yuyi's words revealed surprise. Her eyes looked down, as if she saw the scene on the first floor through the floor. As a master of the Infinity Stones, she was supposed to practice in Kamar Taj. Suddenly, she felt the power from the Infinity Stones, and then came to Hell's Kitchen with a slight sense. However, when her portal opened, she was surprised to find that she could not directly reach the restaurant on the first floor. This situation had never happened before, which made Master Ji Yuyi very confused. In desperation, she could only set the portal on the second floor. When she appeared on the second floor, she immediately felt a strong spatial force. She saw that the restaurant on the first floor was wrapped in an invisible space, as if it had become an independent world. Ordinary people can enter without hindrance, but people with malicious intentions cannot step in half a step. Even if space magic is used, this barrier cannot be broken. Seeing this scene, Master Ji Yuyi mistakenly thought that Chen Yi had mastered the power of the space gem and created a safe space for himself. She was shocked in her heart and was surprised at Chen Yi's talent, whether it was learning the portal at a glance last time, or using the power of the space gem this time. Is Chen Yi really a genius? He can master the space gem in a short period of time. Ji Yuyi was shocked in his heart. She knew very well that when she came last time, Chen Yi did not have the space gem, which also meant that Chen Yi had mastered the space gem from the time he had the space gem. It took less than a month, or even less, for her to master the time stone and use it proficiently. You have to know that she herself is known as the genius of Kamar Taj, and she is also the Sorcerer Supreme. It took her decades to master the power of the time stone. Is the person in front of her really more suitable to be the next generation of Sorcerer Supreme than Strange? So, Master Ancient One came here today because of the space stone? Chen Yi asked, breaking the silence. He had already noticed her intention. I'm just borrowing it. I will return the space stone in 2 days. Chen Yi did not master the power of the space stone, nor was he interested in the power of the space stone. All this can only be attributed to the credit of the system. Ancient One shook his head and continued, this is just one aspect. Recently, because of you, the timeline of our universe has fluctuated. You should know very well that I am just reminding you that there will be more powerful enemies in the future. You and the group of people downstairs alone are not enough, so it is best not to kill them all. Chen Yi understood what Master Ancient One meant. It was nothing more than a recent fight with S.H.I.E.L.D. and then destroying Tony's joining the Avengers. Another thing is to let him show mercy to the Avengers and S.H.I.E.L.D. Chen Yi did not agree to Master Ancient One's request, but looked at Ancient One firmly and said, if people don't offend me, I won't offend others. If people offend me, I will offend them. Master Ancient One, you should also know that I am not a person who likes to cause trouble. I just want to protect my family and Hell's Kitchen. After listening, Ancient One was silent for a while. He also knew that Chen Yi was right. It was just trouble that came to his door. Try not to cause too much killing. After all, I don't have much time. In the future, I will rely on the new generation of Supreme Sorcerers, Ancient One said helplessly. Why don't you be the Supreme Sorcerer? I think you are more suitable than Strange. Ji Yuyi continued to persuade. Chen Yi's strength and his strength are more suitable for being the Supreme Sorcerer than Strange. Chen Yi waved his hand and refused immediately. You know me, I just want to stay in Hell's Kitchen, or you move the New York Temple here, Master Ji Yuyi, so that I can take care of it. Chen Yi was not interested in the Supreme Sorcerer, but was very interested in the New York Temple, which had been passed down for thousands of years. There were many treasures in it, and Chen Yi was very envious, but Chen Yi also knew that this was impossible. After all, the New York Temple had been there for thousands of years without changing, how could it change because of his words? But what Chen Yi didn't expect was that Master Ji Yuyi didn't refuse directly, but looked thoughtful. The old man was very happy. If you can become the Supreme Mage, you can change whatever you want in the New York Temple. Anyway, you will be the Supreme Mage by then. You just need to convince other mages. Plus, now that you have the space gem, it is very possible. The words of Master Ji Yuyi were gentle and solemn, as if he had given Chen Yi an unparalleled honor. As long as you become the Supreme Mage, I will die immediately. Whether the New York Temple can be moved depends on your own ability. Ji Yuyi thought to himself. The teacup in Chen Yi's hand paused, and his heart was full of surprise and confusion. He glanced at Master Ji Yuyi, and saw a faint smile on her face, and her deep eyes seemed to see through everything. The temple has been here for so many years, so why is it moved? Does this Ancient One think too highly of me? I really don't know magic. Chen Yi thought to himself. Chen Yi didn't know that the Ancient One looked so kind, but he was actually plotting a trick behind the scenes. At this time, Chen Yi thought that the Ancient One even used the New York Temple, a place that had been passed down for thousands of years, as a bargaining chip in order to make him the new generation of Supreme Sorcerer. The title of Supreme Sorcerer does sound a bit tempting, but he really doesn't know much magic. Chen Yi started to feel a headache when he thought about having to protect the safety of the earth after becoming the Supreme Sorcerer, and a lot of troubles were waiting for him. He didn't even manage a small Hell's Kitchen, how could he manage Kamar Taj? So, Chen Yi shook his head at the Ancient One without hesitation and refused. Let Strange be the Supreme Sorcerer, he is more suitable than me. He secretly decided in his heart that he would never take this hot potato. If Master Ji Yuyi has nothing to do, I should go downstairs and prepare for dinner. Chen Yi issued an expulsion order to Master Ji Yi. Whoever wants to be the Supreme Master can be the Supreme Master, but I will never be the Supreme Master, Chen Yi said in his heart. Master Ji Yi looked at Chen Yi, a trace of disappointment flashed in her eyes, but she did not force it. She did not expect that the position of the Supreme Master, which countless mages dreamed of, was worthless to Chen Yi, and she refused again and again. If other mages knew, they would definitely fight with Chen Yi. But she understood that everyone has their own choices. She stood up and prepared to leave. Come with me in 2 days, I will take you to see someone. Chen Yi frowned and asked, Master Ji Yi, I am the head of Hell's Kitchen now, and I am really busy. He felt that Master Ji Yi seemed to train him as a disciple, and he had to take him with him in everything, which made him feel very uncomfortable. He did not think that being appreciated by the Supreme Sorcerer was a good thing, but rather a trouble. So Chen Yi continued, if you really need someone, I will immediately arrange for someone to drive a car to hit Strange. Don't worry, Hell's Kitchen is professional in this regard, and we guarantee that no one will be killed. Ji Yi was not angry after hearing this, and smiled and said, I am taking you to Asgard to meet Odin. After all, if I am not here, you, the strong man on earth, will be needed to deter threats from outside the earth. Chen Yi understood instantly after hearing this. It was nothing more than that Ji Yi, the strongest man, was ready to seek death. Ji Yi was worried that if he was not here, other forces would invade the earth, so Ji Yi planned to take him to Asgard to swear brotherhood. As for why Ji Yi looked for him, Chen Yi knew it very well. It was because he was friends with the next Supreme Sorcerer Strange. Thinking of this, Chen Yi felt unhappy with Strange, whom he had not seen for a long time. Chen Yi made up his mind to beat him up when he saw Strange next time. However, Chen Yi was also looking forward to Asgard. Maybe he could make some good friends and improve his friendship. I wonder if I can meet Loki, the god of stories, Chen Yi thought. Chen Yi nodded and agreed to Master Ji Yi, saying that he would go to Asgard with him. When Master Ji Yi saw Chen Yi nod, a golden portal immediately appeared behind him. Before leaving, Master Ji Yi did not forget to remind Chen Yi, there is another parallel universe you haven't been to yet. Remember to find me when you have time. After that, Master Ji Yi walked into the portal and returned to his Kamar Taj. This bald guy is too good at ordering people around, Chen Yi complained in his heart. At this time, Wanda knocked on the door and asked Chen Yi to go downstairs for dinner. On the way downstairs, Wanda curiously asked Chen Yi what he was doing upstairs and why he took so long to come down. Chen Yi reluctantly explained the arrival of the Ancient One and said that he was going to another planet. After listening to Chen Yi's story, Wanda's eyes flashed with determination. She decided to let Chen Yi take her with her this time no matter what. The last time Chen Yi went to the parallel universe, she was not able to go with him, which made Wanda always feel upset. When Chen Yi walked downstairs, he saw 3 tables full of family members and partners who were already seated, waiting for his arrival. Looking at these familiar and friendly faces, Chen Yi felt a warm current in his heart. They are all his family and partners, and they are willing to give everything for each other. Chen Yi sat in his seat, feeling the warmth and happiness. He couldn't help thinking in his heart, this may be the life I want. If I really can't go back to the world of my previous life, it seems that it's not bad to live like this. Because of the system, he didn't feel alone in this strange world. However, for Chen Yi, returning to the original world is a kind of persistence and motivation that drives him forward. He will not give up so easily. As Chen Yi's godfather, Jin Bing raised his beer at this time and said, everyone can gather together because of Chen Yi. As his godfather, I am proud of him. I also hope that everyone will take care of this stinky boy. He is actually a very lazy guy. If there is anything you think he did wrong but dare not say, just come to me, I will teach this stinky boy a lesson. Hearing this, everyone couldn't help laughing. Chen Yi shook his head helplessly and didn't say much. After all, Uncle Jin Bing was also doing it for his own good. Then let's pick up the wine glass and toast to being able to gather together. Jin Bing usually doesn't drink beer, but it doesn't hurt to drink a little on this occasion today. Cheers! Chen Yi and all his friends and family stood up and raised their glasses and drank them all. In this joyful and warm atmosphere, everyone began to enjoy food and drinks. They talked and laughed, sharing each other's stories and experiences, as if they had become a big family. Chen Yi was also immersed in this atmosphere, feeling this happiness and satisfaction. Gradually, the party came to an end. Suddenly, Deadpool stood up with a mysterious and naughty smile on his face. He looked at everyone and said, "Since everyone is so happy, do you want to have some fun?" Hearing this, everyone looked at Deadpool in confusion. Chen Yi covered his forehead, wondering what this guy was going to do. "Chen Yi, didn't I just accept Harry as my apprentice recently? Didn't you also accept Peter as your apprentice? Do you want to let them compete to see who teaches the stronger apprentice? The loser must agree to a request from the winner," Deadpool said meanly. As soon as these words came out, everyone present showed great interest. After all, who doesn't want to see the contest between two young juniors? What more, there is a bet that the loser has to meet a requirement of the winner, which definitely adds to the fun of the game. At this time, everyone's eyes were focused on Chen Yi. Chen Yi did not intend to spoil everyone's fun. He pondered for a moment, and then said seriously, "First of all, I don't have an apprentice, and secondly, this requires the consent of the parties involved." Chen Yi was not interested in the bet proposed by Deadpool. He thought it was just some boring things about picking up girls. However, he was a little curious about the strength of Peter and Harry. So he turned to them, his eyes full of expectations. Everyone also looked at Peter and Harry with a good look. Toby's version of Peter felt a little disappointed when he heard Chen Yi's words. He thought to himself, "Sure enough, Master still didn't acknowledge me. Is it because I'm too weak and afraid that I'll lose face?" But he immediately cheered up and secretly decided to work harder to get Chen Yi's recognition. He said to Chen Yi with a firm look in his eyes, "No problem, Master, I can do it." And Harry was not as hesitant as Peter. He did not choose to be pushed by his master Deadpool all the time, but decided to stand up on his own. Wanda, Tony and others watched this scene with interest, and they were all looking forward to the next development. Suddenly, Chen Yi made a suggestion. "Wait a minute, Harry and Peter often fight each other, and their strength is similar. Why don't you let them choose someone present as an opponent, so that they will encounter different types of opponents in the future, and they can't let them always fight each other?" Chen Yi's words echoed in the air, making people feel both surprised and expected. This proposal immediately attracted the attention of everyone present, and they all looked at Chen Yi, waiting for his next words. Harry seemed extremely excited, with a challenging light flashing in his eyes. However, Toby's version of Peter glanced at everyone present with a worried look on his face, and then looked at Chen Yi. He was afraid that he would accidentally hurt the people present. After all, these were all Chen Yi's partners and family. Chen Yi seemed to see Toby's version of Peter's worry, and he smiled and comforted, "Don't worry, there is no one here that you can beat." Hearing Chen Yi's words, the partners present were amused by Toby's version of Peter. Dr. Octopus, who was more familiar with Toby's version of Peter, patted Peter on the shoulder and encouraged, "Don't worry, they are all very strong. Just treat it as an opportunity to learn." Toby's version of Peter, whose thoughts were seen through, was embarrassed and blushed at this time. He scratched his head and looked at Harry. Deadpool tilted his head and asked, "Then how do you count the win-or-loss, and everyone they picked has different strengths, which is unfair? Chen Yi, are you afraid of me?" His words were full of provocation, and it was obvious that he was not satisfied with this proposal. Harry and Peter also looked at Chen Yi when they heard Deadpool's question. It was obvious that they also wanted to know the rules of the game. Chen Yi slowly answered Harry and Peter, "If you can beat your opponents, it depends on who takes the shorter time. If you can't beat your opponents, it depends on who can last longer. As for who they choose as a contestant, it depends on their luck. Sometimes luck is also a kind of strength," Chen Yi said meaningfully. "Now you can choose your opponents," Chen Yi said to the two with a smile. Harry and Toby looked at the people around them and began to choose their opponents, while Chen Yi's other partners and family also looked at them with interest to see who they would choose as their opponents. "Now you can choose your opponents," Chen Yi said to the two with a smile. Harry and Toby immediately looked at the people around them and began to choose their opponents. Deadpool saw this scene and immediately wanted to cheat and tell Harry which partner was a soft persimmon. However, before he could open his mouth, Wanda once again used chaos magic to throw Deadpool against the wall and sealed his mouth. All he could hear was the sound of Deadpool whimpering as he was pressed against the wall. It was obvious that he was extremely dissatisfied with Wanda's behavior. Chen Yi is such a fool. I must not take such a fool home, Deadpool complained in his heart as he was pressed against the wall. However, no one heard his complaints because he had been sealed by Wanda. Toby Peter was carefully observing this group of Chen Yi's companions, his eyes wandering over each of them, looking for a suitable opponent. Toby Peter's first. The first thing he saw was the Kingpin family chatting. He shook his head and said, "No, this is Master's godfather, and you can tell from the muscles of Master's godfather that he is not a character that can be easily messed with." Then he saw the blind duo of Master Yi and Daredevil, and he denied it again in his heart, "I can't hurt disabled people. Even if I win, I won't be recognized by everyone." Although he knew that these two seemed to have difficulty in moving, their strength should not be underestimated. Toby's version of Peter is a principled person. He is unwilling to hurt disabled people, and even more unwilling to gain recognition by defeating them. He once again set his sights on Wanda and Jessica Jones beside Chen Yi and thought to himself, "That's Master's wife, and I can't beat her." Even Harry's master was rubbed on the ground, and girls can't beat him. Just when he was hesitant, his eyes suddenly fixed on a silver-haired man who was playing video games. He also learned during the meal that this man was Master's wife's younger brother Pietro. Pietro was a little older than him, but he looked full of energy. Toby Peter's heart moved, thinking that Pietro might be the opponent he was looking for. He secretly made up his mind to challenge this Pietro. What he didn't expect was that his good friend Harry also took a fancy to Pietro, and walked up faster than him, patted Pietro's shoulder, and said to Chen Yi, "I have chosen an opponent." Seeing this scene, he couldn't help feeling frustrated. He didn't expect that the opponent he chose was snatched away by his good friend, which made him feel very disappointed. However, what Toby Peter didn't know was how lucky he was. Chen Yi was also stunned when he heard that Harry would choose Pietro, and he had already determined the winner of this game in his heart. Chen Yi couldn't bear to remind Harry, "Are you sure you want Pietro to be your opponent?" However, Harry didn't care at all, his eyes were full of enthusiasm and expectation. He fantasized about showing a heroic figure in the game, completely ignoring the pitying eyes of the people around him. He nodded firmly and said to Chen Yi, "I'm sure." Harry's voice was full of confidence and determination, but his master Deadpool was anxiously humming, as if reminding him to make a wiser choice. However, Harry was already immersed in his own fantasy and didn't hear it at all. Chen Yi looked at Peter and was also curious about who he would choose as his opponent. After all, as long as it wasn't too outrageous, Peter would basically win. No one could beat Pietro in terms of speed. Chen Yi looked at Harry, who was full of motivation, with pity. Chen Yi couldn't help looking at Harry, who was full of motivation, with pity. He knew that some people had already lost before the game started. The two of them were in a state of panic, and the two of them were in a state of panic. Just when Toby's version of Peter was still struggling to choose who to be his opponent, Tony walked to Chen Yi's side and said, "Why don't you give me that cosmic cube to study for 2 days?" Tony was not interested in the duel between the two little brats. He was very interested in the space gem now, and he wanted to take it back to study it. Why is there such a magical thing in the universe, and what is the principle of the energy of the space gem? All of this made Tony full of questions. If he could not beat Chen Yi, Tony would want to take the space gem home, maybe it could add some power to his armor. Not in vain, $5 million a day, lend it to me for a few days. He stretched out 5 fingers, with a gleam of expectation in his eyes. Chen Yi looked at Tony's rich appearance and wanted to refuse directly. After all, the space gem still had a use and needed to replenish the energy of the exclusive skill barrier. But he saw Peter was still struggling to find an opponent. He had an idea in his mind. "No need to pay. After all, I only charged you $100 million. I can lend you the space gem for 2 days, he said lightly. Anyway, he didn't plan to return the space gem. This thing is still very useful. Tony's eyes lit up when he heard this. However, he did not show excitement immediately, but looked at Chen Yi vigilantly. He understood a truth. Free is always the most expensive. He waited for Chen Yi's next words. Could it be that Chen Yi didn't want to see the big trouble of S.H.I.E.L.D.? If it was for the space gem, Tony didn't mind blocking the trouble of shield for Chen Yi. But you have to fight this little guy, Chen Yi pointed at Peter and said. Tony was stunned after hearing this. He originally thought that Chen Yi would make some excessive demands, but he didn't expect it to be such a simple request. Then he had no reason to refuse. You said he was not your apprentice, but you are so concerned about him. Tony teased. No problem, then let me see how strong your apprentice is. Tony nodded, a hint of fighting spirit flashed in his eyes, but I won't show mercy. No problem, hit him hard, Peter is not as weak as you think. Chen Yi still maintained a calm expression, as if he had absolute confidence in Peter's strength. Tony didn't care about Chen Yi's answer. How strong can a little guy who looks like an adult be? Tony walked up to Peter, patted him on the shoulder and said, Young man, your master asked me to be your opponent. There was a hint of teasing in his tone, and he didn't seem to take Peter seriously. Peter was nervous when he heard Tony say this. He didn't know how strong Tony was, but he unconditionally believed that Chen Yi would not harm him. So, he nodded and tried to look calmer. Since we have chosen our opponents, let's fight quickly, Tony said and planned to walk out of the restaurant to prepare for the competition. He just wanted to end the battle quickly and then take the space gem home to study. However, seeing Tony and his group go out, Chen Yi stopped them. No, just compete here. Everyone was a little confused. How can they fight in such a small space? How can we compete here? Harry was the first to ask. Don't you want your restaurant anymore? Wanda said in surprise. Tony didn't have any objections, but this would indeed limit his ability. He looked at Chen Yi, wondering what he was planning. Chen Yi smiled mysteriously and said softly, Who said we are going to fight here? His eyes swept over everyone, and finally his eyes fell on a blank wall in the corner of the restaurant. At the moment when everyone's eyes were focused on him, the wall suddenly changed, and a door appeared out of thin air. The appearance of this door shocked and puzzled everyone present. They looked at each other, their faces full of confusion. However, Chen Yi seemed very calm. He gently pushed open the door, then turned to the people in the restaurant and said, Why don't you come over? What are you doing there? Everyone woke up as if from a dream. They immediately followed Chen Yi's steps and walked into the mysterious door. Once they entered the door, they found themselves in a square room, about 100 square meters in size. The four walls of the room, smooth as a mirror, reflecting a faint light, giving people a mysterious and profound feeling. Tony Stark widened his eyes and looked at everything around him. He asked, Is this also the ability of the space gem? His voice was full of expectation and curiosity. Deadpool was released by Wanda and was even more excited to touch the left and right in the room, as if he wanted to find out the secret of this space. He has lived here for so long, but he has never found this hidden space. Looking at the curious and puzzled eyes of the crowd, Chen Yi of course had to hide the role of the system and explained, Yes, this space is created by the power of the space gem. Moreover, this space has the ability to continue to expand. More importantly, no matter what kind of attack you make here, this space can withstand it. So, if you have nothing to do in the future, you can also train here. When everyone heard this, they all showed surprise on their faces. Deadpool was the first to pick up 2 knives and slashed at the wall, and found that there were really no knife marks on the wall. No one noticed that Chen Yi had a painful expression on his face at this time. God knows that he spent more than 200 friend points for this space. However, seeing their shocked and surprised expressions, Chen Yi could only comfort himself that it was not a loss. Okay, don't try it yet. Let's start the competition. Harry, you and Pietro start first. Chen Yi interrupted everyone's curious appreciation of this space and began to urge the game. Soon, Harry and Pietro were facing each other in the center. Then the competition officially begins, Jessica Jones said while pinching the stopwatch. He was arranged by Chen Yi to be the referee. Pietro put on goggles and asked Harry, Do you want me to let you go? His words were full of confidence, as if he was confident about the result of this game. Harry immediately took out his lost drive and said with a firm look in his eyes, No, go all out. Pietro shrugged. Chen Yi looked at the hopeless Deadpool and said, How about we cancel the bet? Chen Yi knew that Harry had no chance of winning, because he had already felt that Pietro had used his mutant superpowers to move quickly. Deadpool turned to face Chen Yi and said stubbornly, "Don't underestimate Harry. He still has the transformer you gave him, plus the world's best invincible fighting skills I taught him. He can't lose." Chen Yi shook his head slightly, pointed at Harry who was competing behind Deadpool, and reminded him, "It's over. You might as well turn around and see how your apprentice Harry is doing now." Deadpool turned around half-believingly, only to see that Harry had been tied up by Pietro with a rope that came from nowhere, and the lost drive that was originally in his hand was now in Pietro's hand. "No, Harry, how did you lose so quickly? My beach, sunshine, and beauty." Deadpool roared while holding his head. Unwilling to give up, he walked to Quicksilver and complained, "Can't you give way to the kid?" Everyone smiled and shook their heads when they saw this scene. Although this duel was a foregone conclusion, the next match between Chen Yi's apprentice Peter and Tony still aroused their strong interest. The two of them were so frustrated that they had to fight. Chen Yi walked up to Harry and looked at his frustrated look, and couldn't help but feel a little funny. He patted Harry on the shoulder and said, "Harry, sometimes luck is also a kind of strength. Before fighting with your opponent, you must carefully observe your opponent and understand your opponent, so that you can know yourself and the enemy, and you will never be in danger in 100 battles." Harry listened to Chen Yi's words, and a trace of confusion flashed in his eyes. He hadn't completely recovered from the game just now. In a few seconds, he didn't even have the chance to transform into a masked rider, and he was defeated. He looked at Pietro walking away in the distance, and his heart was full of unwillingness and doubts. "Mr. Chen Yi, your partners are so strong," Harry said with a little unwillingness. He originally thought that his strength had improved greatly during this period of time and he could help Chen Yi. But he didn't expect that anyone around Chen Yi could easily defeat him. Sure enough, only the strong can stay by Mr. Chen Yi's side. "I must continue to work hard," Harry thought to himself. Chen Yi looked at Harry's lost look and felt a sense of emotion in his heart. He knew that Harry was a young man with great potential, but he still needed more training and growth. So he smiled and comforted, "Harry, it's okay, you are still young and have a long way to go. One day you will become as strong as them. In fact, you just picked the wrong opponent." Just then, Deadpool came over, put his arm around Harry's shoulders, and pulled him closer to him. He looked at Chen Yi with disdain and said, "Boy, go away, this is my apprentice, you don't need to comfort him." Deadpool hugged Harry and walked out while bragging. He said, "Harry, this is just an accident. Pietro's superpower just restrains you. If I take action, Pietro is definitely not my opponent. Back then, as long as your master, I took action, Pietro was beaten to his knees and begged for mercy. As long as you study hard with me, you can get revenge within 3 years." Deadpool certainly didn't tell him that he might not be able to beat Pietro, and even got pranked by Pietro in the last mission to save Tony Stark. Harry, the young man, heard Deadpool's words, and his eyes flashed with admiration and worship. He knew that his master Deadpool was a powerful man. As long as he studied hard and improved his strength, he would definitely be able to help Mr. Chen Yi in the future. So, he nodded and said to Deadpool seriously, "Thank you, master. I will definitely study hard with you. I will definitely help you and Mr. Chen Yi in the future. I am your master. Just help your master. Why do you always think about Mr. Chen Yi?" Deadpool said, hooking Harry's neck. Deadpool didn't understand why everyone who had been with Chen Yi couldn't forget him. Chen Yi, that guy, except that he was a little richer, younger, stronger, and his appearance was comparable to his, what was he better than him? The more Deadpool thought about it, the more he felt something was wrong, and shook his head, trying to get rid of these worries in his mind. "Forget it, it's useless to think so much. At least I have more girls than him." He patted Harry's shoulder and whispered in a mean way, "Go back and help me arrange a few more girls, so that I can teach you skills better." On the other side, Toby's version of Peter also walked to the center of the venue, facing Tony Stark who looked relaxed. He took a deep breath. Witnessing the powerful strength displayed by the people around Master Chen Yi, Toby's version of Peter felt pressured. He knew that Mr. Tony in front of him should not be underestimated either. Although he was well prepared, the last duel between Pietro and Harry made him realize that every battle should not be taken lightly. Toby Peter knew clearly that he had to show his full strength, not to lose too badly in this game, and not to embarrass Master Chen Yi. Under such psychological suggestion, Toby Peter put on his spider hood and prepared to meet the next challenge. Tony smiled and watched Peter put on the cheap Spider-Man suit, and teased, "It seems that your master didn't prepare a better suit for you." After that, Tony's iron suit automatically wrapped around his whole body, emitting a dazzling light. Seeing this scene, Toby Peter couldn't help but exclaimed, "This is so cool." Hearing Toby Peter's exclamation, Tony proudly replied, "If you can beat me, I will make you a better set for your master's sake." Of course, in Tony's heart, he didn't think he would lose to this young man. This was just a coaching match. Jessica Jones saw that the two were ready, so she announced the official start of the competition. As her clock sounded, Toby's version of Peter and Tony quickly rushed to each other and started a fierce battle. Tony didn't know Peter's strength. Although he said he would not show mercy, he was also afraid that lasers and missiles, which are hot weapons, would hurt Peter, so he chose close combat at the beginning. He felt that his iron armor close combat ability was enough to crush the opposite little spider. But after several fights, Tony found that the opposite little spider's combat ability was very good, and his strength was equal to that of him wearing the iron armor, and even stronger than him wearing the iron armor. Relying on the combat skills taught by Chen Yi and his own spider sense, the little spider fought Tony evenly for a while. Everyone was watching this competition. After all, Chen Yi's apprentice was in this competition, although he did not admit it. Seeing that Spider-Man was fighting Tony on equal terms, everyone was shocked. They did not expect that Chen Yi was not only strong himself, but also good at teaching others. Kingpin's son Richard even walked up to Chen Yi and said, "Brother, you can also teach me. I also want to be as strong as Peter." Chen Yi smiled and refused when he heard Richard's request. "Your brother and I learned a lot of fighting skills from your father. You can ask your father. I dare not teach you. I am afraid of being beaten by him." Kingpin also walked to the sidelines, watching the fierce battle on the field, with a satisfied light in his eyes. He walked up to Chen Yi and patted him on the shoulder. "Smelly boy, now you are so strong that you dare to tease me. You really taught well. I guess I won't be able to beat this little Spider-Man in a few years." His words were full of admiration and pride for Chen Yi. Chen Yi heard Kingpin's words and muttered in his heart, "That's right, even without me, Spider-Man can beat you. Of course, that's without the enhancement." In many parallel universes, Spider-Man and Kingpin can be said to love and hate each other, each with their own wins and losses, but now Kingpin has the shining fruit given by Chen Yi. Basically, Peter will definitely not be able to beat Kingpin if he doesn't have his own enhancement. Chen Yi also saw Tony's concerns and shouted to Tony, "Tony, don't worry, use all your strength, Peter is thick-skinned and can't die." Hearing Chen Yi's words, Tony immediately put down his concerns and began to devote himself to the battle. "Spider-Man is ready. I'm going to use all my strength," Tony said seriously. "I'd love to, Mr. Tony," Peter answered firmly. The enemy was in a state of panic, and the enemy was in a state of panic. Tony no longer held back and began to fire at Spider-Man Peter. When Chen Yi saw this scene, he thought that Tony was too arrogant before. It was obvious that Iron Man with hot weapons was the complete form, but he had to play close combat with Peter. Although Peter seemed to be very thin, he actually had a very strong power in his body, otherwise he would not have defeated Kingpin in other time and space. Although Peter had extraordinary spider sense and could predict danger in advance, he could not completely dodge under Tony's fierce attack. Missiles and lasers poured down like a rainstorm, smoke and dust rose, and the battlefield was in chaos. Peter tried his best to avoid, but his body was still hit by lasers and missiles. He fell to the ground in pain, the smoke was everywhere, and his figure was looming in the smoke. Tony's high-tech equipment allowed him to clearly see the little spider in the smoke. He mistakenly thought that the overall situation was settled, so he flew to Chen Yi's side. "Your apprentice is still good, but he is still a little worse than me," Tony said proudly to Chen Yi after taking off his helmet. Tony reached out to Chen Yi for the space gem. He couldn't wait to get this gem that he had been thinking about so that he could go back and study it carefully. However, Chen Yi did not give him the space gem as he wished, but smiled and said to him, "The game is not over yet." Hearing this, Tony looked back subconsciously, and saw the smoke dissipate, and Peter's figure appeared in his sight again. Peter did not give up. He struggled to stand up. Although his spider suit was tattered and his face became dark because of gunpowder, his eyes were more determined. He looked at Peter in shock, unable to believe that this seemingly fragile little spider could withstand his fierce attack. Tony quickly put on his helmet, flew into the air, and shouted to Peter, "I didn't expect that he was fine after such an attack." His voice was full of surprise. Peter looked at Tony firmly, raised a smile at the corner of his mouth, and said, "I'm not that weak. Your attack is much worse than that of the master." His words were full of confidence, as if Chen Yi's teaching made him fearless. Hearing Peter's words, Tony was not angry. Instead, he admired Peter and was surprised by Chen Yi's teaching ability. Maybe I should also find Chen Yi to improve my fighting skills, Tony thought involuntarily. Tony launched another attack, each time more fiercely, trying to find Peter's flaws. When everyone heard Peter's words, they looked at Chen Yi. They didn't expect Chen Yi to be so heavy on his apprentice. Kingpin's son Richard heard Peter's words, looked at his shabby Spider-Man suit, shook his head, and immediately gave up the idea of asking Chen Yi to teach him. After all, he thought he didn't have a body as strong as Peter. Harry even said to his master, "Master, can Mr. Chen Yi also spur me on later?" Harry was very envious of Peter's ability to fight Tony. He and Peter trained together every day. The only difference was that he had not been taught by Chen Yi, so he asked Deadpool to ask Mr. Chen Yi to teach him. Deadpool did not answer Harry's words, but squatted in the corner and drew circles with his fingers, muttering, "I am not as good as Chen Yi, I am not as good as Chen Yi." Harry saw the master, who hurried forward to comfort him. Watching the increasingly fierce battle between Iron Man and Peter, Wanda stood aside, her eyes revealing her concern for the battle. She walked to Chen Yi's side and asked softly, "If you keep fighting like this, your little apprentice seems to win." Chen Yi shook his head slightly, looking deeply at the two people on the battlefield. He said lightly, "It's still early." This sentence surprised Wanda a little. She couldn't help but look at Chen Yi curiously, trying to read more information from his expression. She could see with her eyesight that although Spider-Man seemed to be at a disadvantage and had more and more injuries, she could see that Spider-Man was getting better and better. Tony needed more firepower to hit Peter every time. If this continued, Tony would lose due to insufficient firepower. Tony is not as weak as you think. Peter is still too young, Chen Yi replied. Chen Yi said this because he knew Tony well. He knew that Tony was the smartest man in the Marvel Universe. After all, he is the smartest person in the Marvel Universe and the only one who can stand shoulder to shoulder with gods with a mortal body. Although Chen Yi didn't know what Tony was going to do next, he knew that Peter would never be his opponent with his current status. "Your self-esteem won't allow you to lose to my apprentice," Chen Yi said silently in his heart. Sure enough, Tony also felt the pressure in the battle. He watched the energy of the mecha continue to decline, and his heart began to struggle. He knew that if he continued like this, he might lose the battle. So, he began to ask Jarvis in the helmet, "Jarvis, haven't you analyzed the weakness of the little spider in front of you?" The little spider's combat power exceeded Tony's imagination. It's not that he has no way to defeat the little spider. On the contrary, he can easily defeat the little spider in front of him as long as he uses his trump card. But this trump card was specially prepared by Tony for Chen Yi, and he really didn't want to use it on the little spider in front of him. Tony continued to attack Spider-Man stubbornly. His speed and reaction ability made Tony unpredictable, and he could cleverly avoid every attack. Tony couldn't help but sigh at Peter's talent and potential. "It seems that I still have to use my trump card," Tony muttered softly in his heart, his eyes flashing with determination. The next moment, he seemed to turn into a phantom and disappeared in the competition room. Peter's attack failed, he was stunned, his face full of confusion, and his eyes turned to Chen Yi, as if asking where Tony was. The other people in the room also looked at each other, their eyes also focused on Chen Yi, expecting him to give an answer. Chen Yi frowned slightly. He knew that Tony had the ability of the home system, which could teleport to any place instantly. It seems that Tony teleported back to his home. Chen Yi secretly praised in his heart that Tony, who was hailed as a genius, had mastered the use of the home system so quickly. He remembered that Tony flew over. If he teleported, he should be in the restaurant. So, when did Tony return home? Was it during the time when he was talking with the Ancient One? Did Tony go back for the armor? Chen Yi guessed in his heart. Sure enough, 5 seconds later, Tony's figure appeared in the room again, but at this moment he had changed into a brand new steel armor. Everyone's eyes lit up and they all exclaimed in amazement. The exquisite design and smooth lines of this armor all showed Tony's ingenuity. Tony looked at the shocked expressions of everyone and couldn't help feeling a little proud in his heart. He knew that this armor was undoubtedly his masterpiece so far. He smiled and explained, "This is my brand new armor, originally designed to deal with Chen Yi, so I named it the Anti-Hell Lord Armor." Hearing Tony's words, everyone's eyes turned to Chen Yi. Chen Yi also felt a little confused. He didn't expect Tony to target him so much. He smiled bitterly in his heart. "My brother and I are connected in heart, and you are playing tricks on me here. Are you Iron Man or Batman?" The old man was so angry that he was forced to take action. "Anti-Hell Lord Armor," Pietro couldn't help but exclaimed. He never thought that Tony, a playboy who seemed as cynical as him, would have such a powerful trump card. So I was the only one slacking off, while the playboy was secretly working hard behind the scenes. Deadpool also frowned, and his words were full of dissatisfaction. "Hey, that playboy, have you researched an anti-Deadpool armor for me?" He looked at Tony with dissatisfaction. Why did Tony only research an anti-Chen Yi armor? Did he look down on him, the Deadpool? "I am also very strong." Wanda looked at Chen Yi with a worried look, and her eyes flashed with a firm light. "This Tony actually secretly developed a mecha to deal with you. Do I need to kill him?" In her heart, Chen Yi's safety is the most important thing. Anyone who threatens Chen Yi, no matter who it is, must be wiped out. As long as Chen Yi says a word, Wanda will take action without hesitation. However, Chen Yi waved his hand and said nonchalantly, "It's okay, Tony's personality is like this, he is not targeting anyone, it just makes him feel safe." He didn't think that this so-called anti-Hell Lord armor could pose a threat to him. After all, he had countless abilities. On the contrary, he was very curious about how powerful Tony's armor was. Anyway, Chen Yi knew from the naked eye that this mecha was much stronger than Tony's previous ones. At the same time, Tony was in a very depressed mood. Since he made up his mind to study the anti-Chen Yi armor, he has devoted himself to the research day and night. He made great efforts and hard work, and finally developed the first generation of anti-Hell Lord armor. However, he never expected that his first opponent was not Chen Yi, but Chen Yi's apprentice Spider-Man. Tony confidently said to Spider-Man, "Sorry, I just went out to change my armor. As an apology, I can stand still and let you attack me." Peter looked at Tony in front of him in surprise. He really didn't expect that Tony, who changed into a new armor, would be so confident. He hesitated for a moment and subconsciously looked at his master Chen Yi on the sidelines. Chen Yi nodded slightly, indicating that he also wanted to see how strong Tony's anti-Hell Lord armor was. Seeing Chen Yi nod, Peter no longer hesitated. He quickly concentrated and prepared to attack Tony with all his strength. He understood that this was a rare opportunity and must be seized. However, what Peter didn't expect was that no matter how hard he attacked, Tony was like a sculpture, motionless. Peter's fist hit Tony's armor, making a dull sound, but Tony didn't even shake a bit. "Spider-Man, is this all you can do?" Tony said sarcastically. His words made Peter angry, and he could not help but increase his strength. However, no matter how hard he tried, Tony was still as steady as a rock. Peter felt a little desperate. He noticed that Tony's anti-Hell main mecha began to emit high temperature, which forced him to subconsciously retract his fist. He knew that if he continued like this, his fist would probably be burned. Seeing this scene, Tony said confidently, "My mecha can automatically heat up at high temperature." Tony saw that Peter did not give up, and a sneer appeared at the corner of his mouth. He continued, "Not only that, the ability of my anti-Hell main mecha is several times stronger than that of ordinary mecha. I also specially equipped Chen Yi's high-speed movement ability with monitoring equipment that can slow down hundreds of times. As long as someone approaches me, the mecha can automatically counterattack." Peter's heart sank when he heard this. He knew that Tony was fully prepared, and it would not be easy for him to defeat him. However, he did not retreat. He took a deep breath and prepared for the next challenge. Then next, It's time for you to see the strength of this mecha specially prepared for your master," Tony said, and then launched a fierce attack on Peter. Tony's anti-hell host mecha was like a beast, and every attack hit Peter accurately. Peter could only barely resist, but was unable to fight back. Every time he tried to counterattack, Tony easily resolved it, as if his attack was just a futile struggle in Tony's eyes. Soon, Peter was killed by Tony. He was beaten to the ground and lost his ability to fight. He lay on the ground, panting, his eyes full of unwillingness and frustration. He thought he was strong enough to fight Tony, but reality cruelly told him that the gap between him and Tony was still huge. Soon the referee Jessica Jones announced Tony's victory. But Tony was not happy about the victory at all, but was depressed. The trump card he carefully prepared for Chen Yi was exposed so quickly, and he had to go back and study an Anti-Hell Lord 2.0 again. This first generation is useless, and the trump card is a trump card because it has never appeared. Peter also stood up with difficulty and walked over with a depressed and frustrated face. He thought he was going to win. Who knew that he was beaten by the mecha Tony used to beat the master without any ability to fight back? Is he taking the blame for the master? Chen Yi walked up to Peter and comforted him. "It's okay, you are already great, much better than last time, and it's not unfair to lose to Tony's trump card. Even I need some time to deal with Tony's mecha." Hearing the comfort from the master, Peter's depressed mood also dissipated a lot, but he was also shocked by the gap between his strength and his master. In Chen Yi's opinion, his anti-hell master mecha, which had no ability to fight back, only needed a little time. The master's strength was really unfathomable. After Chen Yi comforted Peter, he walked straight to Tony, who was surrounded by onlookers. Everyone began to look carefully at Tony's new anti-hell master armor, marveling at its power and exquisiteness. Tony looked at the eyes of the people around him, but his heart was full of depression. He knew that his trump card had been exposed, which was undoubtedly a huge hidden danger. "Okay, you sneakily made such a surprise," Chen Yi said jokingly. Tony looked at Chen Yi with an unhappy face and said, "I originally used it to deal with you, but I lost a lot this time. Hurry up and give me the space gem." Tony has decided to take the space gem back to study the second generation anti-hell Lord armor. He won't come out until he has figured it out. Chen Yi looked at Tony's serious face and couldn't help laughing. He took out the space gem and handed it to Tony, who looked unhappy. After Tony got the space gem, he immediately disappeared from the spot. Chen Yi looked at the place where Tony disappeared and couldn't help shaking his head. He knew that this guy must be impatient to go back to study the armor. He sighed and said to himself, "It's just that the trump card has been revealed, as if no one has a trump card." After the happy atmosphere of the family gathering, Chen Yi slowly woke up in the warm sunshine the next morning. He stretched and enjoyed the rare leisure time. After he got up, he did not go downstairs immediately, but stayed upstairs for a while, enjoying the tranquility. Downstairs, the Good Luck restaurant has been completely renewed and has become their gathering place. The restaurant is bustling and full of laughter. Harry and Toby's version of Peter excitedly rushed into the battle space and started a fierce confrontation practice. Their movements were swift and precise, and every attack and defense was full of strength and skill. Tony was immersed in his weapon research and development. Whenever there was a new idea or invention, he couldn't wait to get the battle space for testing. Tony always had a satisfied smile on his face when he saw the weapon in his hand showing amazing power in the battle space. This kind of instant feedback and testing made him feel much more refreshed than testing outside. Aunt May, who had a day off yesterday, was surprised to see so many people suddenly in the restaurant, including the figure of the well-known billionaire Tony Stark. She almost jumped up. She thought her restaurant suddenly became popular, and she was secretly happy. However, when Chen Yi explained to her that these people were his partners, not guests, Aunt May's mood calmed down. Despite this, she was still shocked by Chen Yi's connections. She didn't expect that her boss actually knew so many powerful people, even the billionaire Stark was his friend. This made Aunt May admire Chen Yi even more, thinking that Parker's job should not be a problem in the future, and she worked harder. Chen Yi didn't care about the people in the battle space. He went straight to the kitchen and started to prepare breakfast busily. Before he could take a few bites, he suddenly felt a strong breath flying towards the restaurant. He quickly grabbed a freshly baked bun, moved his body, and flew towards the breath. At the same time, in the sky, Carol was flying at an astonishing speed according to the positioning information provided by the black salted egg. She wanted to complete the mission and return to the universe as soon as possible. She had not yet reached her destination, but suddenly saw two figures flying towards her. However, just as she was about to reach her destination, she unexpectedly encountered two figures flying towards her like a meteor. Carol's heart tightened, and she quickly adjusted the direction of flight and met the other party in the air. Both sides stopped, forming a subtle confrontation. Carol stared at the two people closely, trying to read more information from their appearance and breath. The first person who came into view was a man in a white suit. His face had a decadent beauty, as if he had experienced countless storms, but he was still tenacious. Beside him, a wolf quietly accompanied him, and the deep eyes revealed a strong sense of loneliness. Although he seemed careless, Carol could feel the powerful force surging in his body, as if he was a sleeping beast that could wake up at any time. The other person was an Asian man in casual clothes. He looked very casual, wearing a pair of slippers and holding a bun in his hand, as if he had just walked out of a small restaurant on the street. At the same time, Chen Yi was also looking at the other party. Looking at the appearance of the person coming, with blonde hair and clothes similar to Superman, it should be the captain of the Black Stewed Egg. It seems that the Black Stewed Egg has been forced into a corner by me, and even the captain of the Marvel has been called back. Chen Yi thought to himself. Carol knew in her heart that she had flown into the sphere of influence of Hell's Kitchen at this moment. And one of the two men in front of her is likely to be the target of her mission, this time the legendary Lord of Hell. Black Broiled Egg had told her the location and name of the mission, but before Black Broiled Egg had time to give her the photo of the Lord of Hell, Carol came out anxiously. Carol looked at the two in front of her and felt that the former was more like the Lord of Hell. Thinking of this, Carol said to the man in the white suit, "You are the Lord of Hell, I am here to find you on the order of Nick Fury." The man in the white suit, John Wick, turned around and said to Chen Yi next door, "Boss, she is here to find you. I will go down first if there is nothing else." John also felt a strong breath coming towards the restaurant. Although John is very lazy now, considering that he is a security guard, he will go downstairs. Anne's duty, if that person is an enemy, it will inevitably cause greater harm, so he intercepted it in the air. John knew that he was looking for Chen Yi, and he would have nothing to do with it if he knew it. After hearing what Carol said, Chen Yi just smiled and continued to eat his buns. He looked at Carol, and a hint of teasing flashed in his eyes. "Don't, he is here to find the Lord of Hell, not to find me, Chen Yi, just talk to him." Carol heard the conversation between the two and knew that she had recognized the wrong person. She admitted that she had made a mistake and did not expect that the Asian man in front of her was the Lord of Hell. But who is the Lord of Hell makes no difference to her. She is confident that even if the two of them are added together, they will not be her opponent. "You are the Lord of Hell. Nick Fury asked me to tell you that as long as you join the Avengers, everything you did before will be written off," Carol said stiffly. Carol really didn't understand why Nick Fury kept trying to win over these evil people. In Carol's eyes, all unstable factors were evil people and needed to be eliminated. However, Chen Yi didn't take her words to heart. He smiled and said, "That's it. If there's nothing else, please go back. Go back and tell Black Stewed Egg that as long as no one messes with me, I'm still a very kind person." After that, he was ready to leave. Carol was angered by Chen Yi's attitude. She felt that she was kind enough, but she didn't expect that this so-called Lord of Hell would be so disrespectful. She said coldly, "Are you sure? This is the final ultimatum. If you don't join the Avengers, don't blame us for being rude." Just as Carol was about to make a move, Black Stewed Egg's voice came out. "Chen Yi, are you really sure that you want all the people in Hell's Kitchen to be buried with you because of your decision?" It turned out that Black Stewed Egg installed monitoring equipment and voice equipment on Carol. Chen Yi was not surprised when he heard Nick Fury's voice, as if everything was within his expectations. He said lightly, "You are still as timid as ever, Nick Fury. You know, if you threaten me, I might kill you. Why can a sentence between you and me decide the life and death of Hell's Kitchen? It's really ironic. Is this what you call justice?" His words were full of irony and doubt. "If I agree this time, what about the next time? Will I sacrifice someone else? If you have any tricks, use them, and I will follow. Chen Yi's words were full of determination and firmness, as if he was ready to face everything. As for you, Captain Marvel, Chen Yi said coldly, go back to where you came from. His voice was full of unquestionable orders and threats. After speaking, he raised his hand and waved it, and a powerful chaotic magic power surged out of him, and then his right hand quickly drew a circle of golden light and appeared behind Carol. Throwing Captain Marvel back into the universe, Chen Yi didn't know whether she could come back in the war. The old man was in a mess. Black Braised Egg shouted angrily in front of the surveillance screen in the office. His eyes were fixed on the black screen, and his heart was full of anxiety and uneasiness. He couldn't be sure where Chen Yi had teleported Carol Danvers, and this unknown feeling made him feel very uneasy. Originally, his plan was perfect, and Carol's power was the key to their fight against the upcoming war. But now, everything has become a mess, and he can't predict whether Carol can come back in time. Black Braised Egg frowned, as if he could squeeze out water, and his eyes revealed deep worry. He knew that his position as the director of S.H.I.E.L.D. would be resigned in a few days, which made him feel unprecedented pressure. His desire for control made him unable to accept this uncontrollable situation. This feeling was like a king who was deprived of power, helpless and angry. What made him even more uneasy was that he recently found that there were many new faces in S.H.I.E.L.D. He was not familiar with these people. They should be arranged by the next director. This made him feel excluded, as if his world was being eroded by others. He felt that his control was gradually weakening, and this feeling of being out of control made him feel scared. The atmosphere in the office was so depressing that it made people breathless. Coulson stood aside and dared not speak. He knew that Black Stewed Egg was in a very bad mood now, and he could only silently wait for Black Stewed Egg's next instructions. Go call the military over, Black Egg suddenly said. This time we will cooperate with them to directly eradicate the cancer of Hell's Kitchen. His voice was full of determination and decisiveness. Black Egg added, also, tell the federal government that we will eradicate Hell's Kitchen for them, let them do a good job of public opinion, tell the citizens that we are eliminating harm for the people, and highlight that we are the righteous side. Finally, let the Avengers and X-Men gather for me. Don't go anywhere in the next 2 days. Once public opinion ferments and there is a notice from the federal government, once the action is approved, take action immediately. Coulson nodded immediately and turned to leave the office. He knew that Black Egg's decision meant that they were about to launch a large-scale operation, which would be a severe test of their abilities. As Black Egg's order was passed, the entire S.H.I.E.L.D. immediately took action. The personnel of various departments began to prepare for work intensively and orderly. They knew the importance of this operation and understood their responsibilities. At the same time, the military, Avengers and X-Men also began to receive notices one after another. They put down their work and quickly gathered together. In another office in the S.H.I.E.L.D. building, the atmosphere seemed a little solemn. Crossbones, as an important member of Hydra, frowned and expressed his dissatisfaction to Director Pierce. Director, Nick Fury's move this time is too big, and he didn't even notify you. This is obviously not giving you, the new director, face. Crossbones' words were full of dissatisfaction and provocation to Fury. Director Pierce sat quietly at his desk, holding his glasses in his hands, his eyes deep and complicated. He looked at the busy S.H.I.E.L.D. agents outside the window. Perhaps, this is Nick Fury's last madness, Pierce said lightly, revealing an indescribable depth in his voice. Crossbones was stunned for a moment, obviously not expecting Pierce to look at this matter so calmly. He frowned and asked in confusion, don't we need to stop him? Let Nick Fury know who is the boss here. Pierce turned his head and looked at Crossbones, with a hint of deep meaning in his eyes. He put down his glasses and said slowly, why stop it? Crossbones was even more puzzled. He looked at Pierce in confusion, not understanding why he was so indifferent to Fury's provocation. You know, Pierce usually minds that Nick Fury has stolen his limelight. Not only should we not stop him, but we should also help him. This time we can't let all our people go out, Pierce ordered. Hearing Pierce's words, Crossbones became more anxious. After all, he couldn't let his people go to die. After all, the people in Hell's Kitchen were not weak. This time I believe Nick Fury is fully confident that he can promote this battle, so I asked you to clean up the spoils. And if necessary, kill Nick Fury's people as well, Pierce explained. Pierce knew Black Boiled Egg very well. With Black Boiled Egg's sinister and cunning character, he must have been fully confident before launching this war. Although Chen Yi and Hell's Kitchen were indeed very powerful, they were still far from enough to face a fully operational federal government. Crossbones immediately understood what Pierce meant, which was to remove obstacles. However, Crossbones still asked in confusion, but if Nick Fury wins, then your position will not be secure, right? After all, if Nick Fury can complete the task perfectly, then Pierce will not be the director. This is also the problem that Crossbones is most worried about. Pierce smiled when he heard this question. He said, no matter what, he will not survive after this war. Quote. His words revealed a kind of confidence and coldness, as if everything was under his control. He had no intention of letting Nick survive. He had arranged manpower and plans to give Nick Fury a fatal blow at a critical moment. He believed that he would be the final winner in this battle. Crossbones' heart trembled when he heard this. He understood that Pierce had made comprehensive preparations, not only to weaken Nick Fury's power, but also to take the opportunity to get rid of him. He needs public opinion to ferment. We have plenty of people in Hydra in this regard, let the people below cooperate. Pierce added. Yes, sir. Crossbones answered and turned to leave to execute the order. He knew he had to act as soon as possible, so as not to miss this rare opportunity. Pierce looked at Crossbones' back and muttered to himself, it's a pity that there can only be one winner in this war, and that person must be me. Everything you have worked hard for will become my wedding dress. Quote. There was a hint of anticipation and ruthlessness in his eyes, as if he had seen the moment when he would become the final winner. From the beginning to the end, neither Nick Fury nor Pierce thought that Chen Yi and Hell's Kitchen would win. To them, Hell's Kitchen was just a victim of the power struggle between the two. The newspaper was full of rumors, but the news was not good. What kind of things are written in this newspaper? How can you slander my territory like this? Deadpool threw the newspaper aside and complained to Chen Yi. The newspaper clearly said, Hell's Kitchen, the biggest evil force in the 21st century. Not only that, almost all newspapers today are about our Hell's Kitchen. Pietro looked at Chen Yi with a worried look. Chen Yi flipped through the newspaper, which had various headlines. Shock, the boss of the notorious Hell's Kitchen turned out to be him. The story that Playboy Stark and the boss of Hell's Kitchen have to tell. The government has passed a resolution to rectify Hell's Kitchen in 3 days and eradicate social evils. Chen Yi was also somewhat surprised by the means and connections of He Ludan, who actually thought of using public opinion to eradicate Hell's Kitchen. Chen Yi could not deny that Hell's Kitchen was like this before, but after his efforts, Hell's Kitchen was no longer as evil as before. Aunt May saw the boss's expression and knew what he was thinking. She picked up the remote control and tried to turn on the TV, hoping to make everyone feel a little more relaxed. However, the TV showed a reporter interviewing a federal congressman. Why did the federal government suddenly make the decision to eradicate Hell's Kitchen? The reporter asked the federal congressman seriously. The federal congressman on the TV screen had a solemn expression. The government has always had this idea, and our duty is to protect the safety of citizens. Hell's Kitchen, whether it is people or places, is evil and dirty, just like the sewers of the entire city. The words of the congressman made the hearts of those present sink. They didn't expect that they would be evaluated as dirty and evil. On TV, the federal congressman continued, the existence of Hell's Kitchen makes other citizens feel ashamed and uneasy. After many efforts and coordination, we finally decided to eradicate this evil place within this week. For the safety of citizens, the military has begun to take action and will completely eliminate Hell's Kitchen. Everyone must believe in the federal government. We are incompatible with evil. Chen Yi's face was so gloomy that it seemed that water could drip out. It's not that he couldn't tolerate others' insults to him, but seeing the innocent residents of Hell's Kitchen being implicated, his heart was full of anger and helplessness. Most of the residents of Hell's Kitchen were forced to live in this hardship place because of poverty or lack of identity, and many of them were innocent. However, judging from the attitude of the government, they seemed to intend to attack the entire Hell's Kitchen indiscriminately, and even those innocent people would not be spared. Such a decision made Chen Yi feel very sad, and he could not sit idly by. Auntie May saw that Chen Yi's face was getting gloomier and gloomier, and she knew something was wrong, so she quickly changed the TV channel. However, she didn't expect that the next program would be a reporter interviewing passers-by about their views on Hell's Kitchen. The reporter first asked a little girl, "Excuse me, do you know Hell's Kitchen?" The little girl immediately showed a frightened expression and said in a trembling voice, "My mother said that if I don't listen, she will send me to Hell's Kitchen and let the devil there eat me." After that, she hugged her mother tightly, tears rolled in her eyes, and choked and said, "I am very obedient. I don't want to go to Hell's Kitchen." Then, the reporter interviewed a young man on a skateboard. The young man said with disdain, "Of course I know Hell's Kitchen. It's where the garbage stays. I heard that there are all kinds of illegal things. I had a friend who went in once and never came out again." Finally, the reporter interviewed an elderly person. The old man said angrily, "Of course I know that place. Hell's Kitchen has existed since I was born. It is full of darkness and sin, and innocent people are tortured there. I don't understand why the federal government allows such a place to exist. Thank God, now the federal government has finally made up its mind to eradicate this place." Listening to the comments of these passers-by, Chen Yi's mood became heavier. He knew that the residents of Hell's Kitchen were garbage, criminals, and the cancer of society in the eyes of many people. However, many of them were innocent, they just lived in a place full of sin and darkness. He took a deep breath and decided to fight for these innocent people. He couldn't let the government attack the entire hell indiscriminately. Kitchen, let innocent people get hurt. Woohoo, we have become the out-and-out villains in the eyes of others, Chen Yi. Deadpool still said easily when he saw these remarks, as if the passers-by were not talking about him. Aunt May even comforted him, "Mr. Chen Yi, don't take it to heart. These are what those who have never been to Hell's Kitchen say. We all know that you are a good person, and Hell's Kitchen is slowly getting better. It is not as bad as they say." Pietro stood up and said firmly, "Don't worry, I will always support you. Wherever you go, I will go." His eyes were full of trust and support for Chen Yi. Deadpool also stood up, looked at Chen Yi and said, "I will protect the beautiful little sister of Hell's Kitchen." The corners of his mouth curled up a cynical smile, but his eyes flashed with seriousness and determination. Chen Yi smiled and said, "Don't worry, I'm not as fragile as you think. I know you will support me, but other people in Hell's Kitchen don't think so." Many residents of Hell's Kitchen also saw the news reports, and their reactions were as different as scattered marbles. For those who live in peace and order, Hell's Kitchen is a helpless choice for their lives. They are not willing to live here, but are forced to go nowhere because of poverty. The appearance of Chen Yi brought them a glimmer of hope in life. They believe that under his leadership, life will change. However, the government's ruthless intervention has plunged them into despair again. They silently endured the pain, and the fire of hope in their hearts was extinguished by the cruel reality. However, some people were so angry that they couldn't bear it. They smashed the TV to pieces, and kept cursing those irresponsible government officials and media. They believed that these people were not qualified to deprive them of their right to survive. They decided to take up arms and resist this unfair world. Their anger was like a raging fire, burning the despair and helplessness in their hearts. There are also some people who chose to remain silent. They sat in front of the TV silently, their eyes deep, as if thinking about something. Their hearts were full of confusion and uncertainty, and they didn't know where to go in the future. They were born and raised in this place, and Hell's Kitchen was their home. If they leave home, they will lose everything, including a sense of belonging and security. Some people even blamed Chen Yi for all this. They believed that Chen Yi's repeated troubles led to the intervention of the federal government. They believed that Chen Yi had touched the interests of some people, and thus suffered such misfortune. They were full of resentment and dissatisfaction with Chen Yi, and believed that he was the culprit that caused them to fall into trouble. However, in fact, Chen Yi's original intention was to improve the lives of the residents. He banned the trafficking of drugs and people in order to protect their rights and interests. His behavior touched the interests of some people and attracted government suppression. However, these residents did not know the truth, and they could only make judgments based on the facts they saw. The moment Chen Yi walked out of the restaurant, his brows could not help but furrow. The familiar streets were now in chaos. The originally orderly community was now like a pot of boiling porridge. The residents were panicked because of fear, and their faces were full of helplessness and despair. All this was due to the federal government's policy of leveling. They were like a ruthless hammer, instantly smashing the order they had worked so hard to build. Can't we ask other media to help clarify? Hell's Kitchen is not what they see. Pietro's voice interrupted Chen Yi's meditation. His eyes were full of helplessness and unwillingness, as if he was protesting against the injustice of this world. Chen Yi turned his head, looked into Pietro's eyes, and sighed. They won't understand our efforts. They only see the superficial evil, but not the efforts we have made to change this place. Pietro clenched his fists and said angrily, they can't be so unreasonable. His voice was full of anger and unwillingness, as if he was challenging the injustice of this world. Chen Yi sneered when he heard Pietro's words. Reason, that's what the weak need to do. The strong only need fists. Fists are power, but what the federal government doesn't know is who is the strong. He turned back to the restaurant and faced Pietro. His eyes became firm. Get ready, there will be a big battle soon. His voice was full of determination and firmness. Pietro's eyes became sharp, like a beast ready to pounce on its prey. And Deadpool dog saluted, indicating that they were ready. Hell's Kitchen Community College. In the principal's office, the atmosphere was extremely heavy. Dr. Octopus frowned, holding a resignation letter in his hand, and sighed helplessly. The current situation is really bad, and many teachers and professors have chosen to leave. He looked up at the people present and continued, not only that, some parents of students have also decided to let their children drop out of school. They are worried about their children's safety here. The Punisher punched the wall, his eyes full of anger and helplessness. He finally found a stable life in Hell's Kitchen and saw his children every day, but now, all this seems to be destroyed by the federal government again. The federal government, he cursed in a low voice, clenching his hands into fists. As the principal, Kingpin was smoking a cigar at this time, and his expression was elusive in the smoke. He asked calmly, how many people are there in the school now? Master Yi sat on the sofa, holding his sword with both hands. He said in a deep voice, there are about 300 children in the school now. They are all orphans and have nowhere to go. There are more than 30 professors and security personnel, all of whom are our own people. King Bing nodded, took a deep puff of his cigar, and then slowly exhaled the smoke. He looked at Master Yi and said, then, this school will be handed over to you to protect. William and Frank, you follow Master Yi. Master Yi nodded, knowing that he had a heavy responsibility. He couldn't let these children get hurt, and he would protect them as his own children. Don't worry, the children's future is in my hands, said William Baker, a Sandman, with a firm and loving look in his eyes. He saw many children of the same age as his daughter in the nursery of the community school. Every time he saw them, he seemed to see his own daughter. He decided to stay here for the rest of his life to protect these children. I won't let anyone disturb my son's life again, even if it costs me my life. Punisher Frank's eyes flashed with determination and murderous intent. Nick Fury had informed him yesterday and asked him to take his son away quickly. Punisher Frank also asked the child's opinion. He himself decided to advance and retreat together with Chen Yi, but the only thing he was worried about was his child. When he told the child about this, his child asked him back, if not in Hell's Kitchen, where can I go? This question confused Frank. Hell's Kitchen is the home of him and his child. If he leaves here, where can his child go? No one can ruin his son's life again. Frank, who has lost once, can't make the same mistake again. Even if this person was once his best friend Nick Fury, it is not allowed. Drive Otto, do you want to go back to the apartment with Dr. Ethan? After all, it is safer there, Kingpin asked. Why do you look down on us two old bones? We are not so weak. As a teacher, how can I escape from the battlefield? I will fight side by side with you. Dr. Ethan said. Dr. Octopus smiled and said nothing, but Kingpin saw the answer in his eyes. Okay, then I will leave my son to you. I am relieved that Vanessa has Wanda and others to protect her. After saying that, Kingpin stood up and prepared to leave the office. Principal, where are you going? Don't mess around. Chen Yi will be very sad if something happens to you, Master Yi asked. Kingpin stopped and looked back at Master Yi. He took a deep puff of the cigar and slowly exhaled the smoke. I am the underground emperor Jin Bing. I just retired, not dead. Some people seem to have forgotten my existence, but forgetting comes at a price. There was a kind of majesty and domineering in his voice, as if he had returned to the days when he controlled the underground world. He knew that there were some things Chen Yi didn't want to do, so as a godfather, he would help his kind godson. When it comes to threats and kidnapping, Jin Bing is an expert in this area. He knows how to make people tremble in fear, and he knows how to make people beg for mercy in despair. And now, he is ready to let those who have forgotten him feel his presence again, and let them know that even though he has retired, Hell's Kitchen is still the Hell's Kitchen. He wants those federal government members to know whether they have forgotten the fear that Hell's Kitchen once brought them. If so, Jin doesn't mind letting them recall those days of fear again. But this time, he will make them pay a greater price. The new hotel is open, and the new hotel is open. Hell's Kitchen, Continental Hotel. Manager, many killers are clamoring to check out and ask for a refund of their gold coins, said Lai Ching, the new Continental Hotel housekeeper, to the hotel manager Winston. Hearing the housekeeper's words, Winston frowned and said, "Why? You know, the Continental Hotel is not an ordinary hotel, nor a charity, it is an organization that provides shelter for killers." The housekeeper hesitated and said, "They think that our Continental Hotel is now in trouble and can't provide shelter. Request to check out." Winston frowned. He knew that the news that Hell's Kitchen was going to be raised by the federal government had a great impact. He didn't expect that someone would ask for a refund so soon. You know, this newly opened Continental Hotel has only been open for a month. Before Winston could speak, a waiter suddenly rushed in and shouted, "Manager, it's bad, someone is not following the rules and is threatening us with a gun to return the gold coins." What? Winston was suddenly furious. He didn't expect that someone would be so reckless as to use a gun in the Continental Hotel. Is he not afraid of death? Or does he think that the Continental Hotel in Hell's Kitchen is a soft persimmon? When he walked out of the elevator quickly and came to the lobby, the scene in front of him made him frown. Several gun-wielding killers were holding the waiter hostage, shouting loudly, "Return the money! Return the money!" Their faces were full of anger and dissatisfaction, as if the Continental Hotel owed them something. Winston's eyes were like the cold wind in the cold winter, sweeping across the arrogant killers in front of him sharply and coldly. He had already had a plan in his mind, but he did not attack immediately, but chose a more prudent way to deal with this crisis. He slowly walked towards these killers, and every step seemed steady and powerful. His tone was calm and firm, as if an invisible pressure was pressing on these killers. "Are you sure you want to do this? Don't you know the rules of the Continental Hotel?" After hearing his words, the killers were not afraid at all, but laughed a few times. He replied arrogantly, "You are all in trouble now, what kind of bullshit rules are there? I just want to ask, who can kill me?" The other killers and the onlookers also laughed loudly. Their laughter was full of arrogance and provocation, as if they had completely controlled the whole situation. However, just when they were getting carried away, suddenly a few cold lights flashed. Winston's eyes blurred, and he saw that the killer who had just provoked him and several killers who took hostages had a hole in their heads. Their bodies fell stiffly, and blood stained the carpet red. The whole hall fell into a dead silence, leaving only the sound of blood dripping on the carpet, clear and harsh. Everyone stared at this scene in amazement, as if they couldn't believe their eyes. Winston was also shocked. He didn't expect that someone would dare to kill someone in his territory. However, when he turned his head and looked at the door, he felt relieved. Just then, a lazy voice sounded at the door of the hotel, "I can kill you." Winston looked carefully and saw two figures appear at the door of the hotel. It turned out to be Marcus and John Wick. The killers in the hotel saw the two and immediately recognized their identities. They discussed carefully, their voices full of awe and fear. "It's the legendary killer Night Devil. Isn't it the Night Devil who killed an entire gang because of a dog? Isn't he retired? How could he appear here? The one next to him is also a legendary killer Marcus." The two walked towards Winston, their steps firm and powerful. The other killers did not dare to act rashly because of their reputation. "Why are you here? Aren't you a security guard?" Winston asked John Wick curiously. "The boss called me. He knew that someone would cause trouble at the Continental Hotel, so he asked his two old friends to help you, Lao Ma explained. Winston felt warm in his heart when he heard Lao Ma's explanation. He was full of gratitude and admiration for Chen Yi. He didn't expect Chen Yi to think of him and give a solution at the first time. Okay, let's talk about the past later. Let's do the business first, John's lazy voice interrupted their conversation. He glanced at the killers present and slowly said, no one wants to cause trouble. This is Hell's Kitchen, the territory of Chen Yi, the Lord of Hell. If you are worried that he can't resist the federal government, then get out and forget about getting your money back. Or just stay here peacefully. Our Continental Hotel will protect you. The boss is so powerful that you can't understand it. Do you understand? Although his voice was not loud, it seemed to have a kind of magic that made everyone present hear it clearly. His eyes revealed strong confidence and domineering, as if saying, this is my territory, you'd better be honest. The killers were all in awe when they saw John Wick's eyes, and nodded to show that they understood. They knew that the former king of killers was not joking, and he really had the ability to protect them and let them survive in this dangerous world. John Wick saw that the killers all understood, so he didn't say anything more. He glanced around coldly and found that no one asked any more questions, which meant that no one had any questions. Very good, I will be here for a while, come to me if you have any questions, but I don't like talking to living people. John Wick added. His words made everyone present feel a chill, but at the same time also made them more confident in Chen Yi and the Continental Hotel. They knew that as long as the former king of assassins was there, they could stay here safely without worrying about any danger. As John Wick's voice fell, the assassins also left the hall one after another. Winston looked at the assassins leaving the hall and suddenly had an idea. I don't know if the other elders of the high table will help the boss. Forget about the things between the top leaders. I, a small follower, can't control it. In this way, Winston took Lao Ma and John upstairs to reminisce about the past. At this time, the elders of the high table that Lao Ma was thinking about also held a meeting regarding the federal government's plan to eradicate Chen Yi's power. In the meeting room, the atmosphere was tense and solemn. The 12 large screens corresponded to the 12 elders of the high table. At this moment, 11 screens had been lit up, and the only one that had not yet been lit was Chen Yi's seat. This silently announced Chen Yi's current predicament and highlighted the urgency of the meeting. A female elder broke the silence with a teasing tone. The high table has held meetings very frequently this year, and the meetings were held by the same person. Elder Chen Yi is also very powerful. A Japanese elder said angrily. I think it won't be long before our high table will have to change another elder. At the beginning, I said that Chen Yi's son should not be allowed to be an elder, Baka. Quote. His anger was evident, and he obviously had a strong prejudice against Chen Yi's experience. I have my eyes on his territory, don't compete with me, a white elder said domineeringly. Once this was said, the other elders were not happy. Why? Faced with the chaotic situation, Elder Makudum decisively stepped forward to quell the dispute. Enough, Chen Yi has started to divide up other people's territory before he loses, who else wants to join the high table in the future? His voice was loud and firm, and immediately calmed the scene. A Korean man who looked like a star was unmoved. He said coldly, then what should we do? Help him. Going against the federal government is no different from committing suicide. Elder Makudum made a compromise suggestion. We don't need to help Elder Chen Yi with real guns and bullets. Everyone must have several media channels to speak out. Speak for Elder Chen Yi and change public opinion. Vote, help or not. It depends on you. Quote. After a heated discussion and vote, the final result was 5 votes against and 6 votes in favor. Although this result is not perfect, it at least shows that some elders are willing to lend a hand. After announcing the voting results, Elder Makudum once again emphasized the importance of unity and mutual assistance. Since the vote has passed, everyone should do their part. Those who don't do their part know the consequences if they need our help next time. His warning made those elders who originally had reservations realize their responsibilities and obligations. Makudum has always believed in his own vision. He firmly believes that Chen Yi has great potential and wisdom to overcome this difficulty. He knows which is more valuable, icing on the cake or helping in times of trouble. Makudum looked into the distance and murmured to himself, "Young man, I have helped as much as I can. Whether you can survive this round depends on you." Quote. The students were very excited. In the X Academy, Wolverine Logan, Storm Ororo and Cyclops Scott, 3 members of the X-Men, closely surrounded Professor Charles. Their eyes were full of vigilance, staring at the uninvited visitor in front of them, as if he could pose a threat to Professor Charles at any time. "Don't be nervous, he won't hurt me, Eric, long time no see." Professor Charles's voice was gentle and firm, breaking the tense atmosphere. He smiled faintly at the uninvited guest, Magneto Eric. Magneto Eric. He wore a special helmet, a black cloak, and a complicated expression on his face. He looked at Professor X deeply, and then slowly said, "You shouldn't get involved in this, Charles." Although Magneto didn't say what it was, Professor X knew it well. He was referring to the plan for the X Academy to join the Avengers and assist S.H.I.E.L.D. in eradicating Hell's Kitchen where Chen-Yi was. Charles sighed softly, knowing Eric's concerns. The two of them were once friends, but they parted ways because of different ideas. Eric has always believed that humans and mutants cannot coexist peacefully, while Charles firmly believes that humans and mutants can achieve peace through understanding and communication. This is the fundamental difference between them, and it is also the reason why it is difficult for them to get together again. They promise that as long as we join the Avengers, they will give mutants a real home, a place where we can hold our heads high and no longer be misunderstood and rejected by the world. They even promised to open a school for us mutants, so that our children can receive education like ordinary people and integrate into society. Charles's voice was steady and firm, as if he was telling a beautiful vision. Hearing this, Storm and Cyclops' eyes became more complicated. They didn't expect that Charles joined the Avengers for them and for the future of mutants. This made them both moved and worried, and they knew how difficult this decision was for Charles. However, Eric's words were like a bucket of cold water poured on their hearts. Did they fulfill their promise? What about the promised home? What about the school? Why are you still here? There was a hint of dissatisfaction and disappointment in his tone. Charles was a little stunned by this question, but he quickly adjusted his mood and looked up at Eric, his eyes full of firmness and determination. They said they would fulfill their promise after the matter was done, Eric. I believe them. However, Eric did not agree with his opinion. You are so naive, Charles. Do you think they really care about the future of us mutants? They are just using you. His words were full of sarcasm and dissatisfaction, as if revealing a cruel reality. I don't need to tell you what kind of personalities those people in the federal government have. They are all a bunch of people who say one thing in front of you and another behind your back. Do you believe that if you destroy Hell's Kitchen now, the next one will be us mutants? In the final analysis, they are just afraid of people who are stronger than them. What a bullshit home, the school is fake. Charles listened to Eric's words and was silent for a while. He did not refute or explain, but just sat quietly in the wheelchair, as if thinking about something. Wolverine smoked a cigar and looked out the window, revealing a complex emotion in his eyes. And the smart Cyclops looked at Charles with a worried look on his face. He didn't think there was anything wrong with Magneto's words. I believe them, Charles replied. You should know that Hell's Kitchen is not as bad as you think, and I also know Chen-Yi, the Lord of Hell. He is a good guy, and his strength is something you don't understand. Magneto tried to continue to persuade Charles. Charles didn't expect Magneto to know Chen-Yi and have been to Hell's Kitchen. He looked at Eric in surprise. I'm not afraid of you laughing at me. I once tried to persuade Chen-Yi to join the Brotherhood of Mutants, Magneto said with a wry smile. What happened? Wolverine asked for the first time. Radiation looked at Wolverine like an idiot. Wolverine looked puzzled, not understanding why everyone looked at him like that. I lost. If Chen-Yi hadn't shown mercy, I might have died. Eric admitted frankly. His own failure. This sentence shocked the 4 people present. They did not expect that such a powerful Eric would actually lose to others, and survive from others. This made them more wary of Chen-Yi's strength and the situation in Hell's Kitchen. So you still want to take your people to die? Eric looked at Charles and asked. He had put down his face and did not hesitate to say that he had been defeated by Chen-Yi to persuade Charles. He hoped that Charles could see the reality and not blindly believe in those so-called promises and expectations. However, Charles was not shaken by Eric's words. He still said firmly, I will arrange everything. Magneto heard Charles's answer and smiled bitterly. Sure enough, no matter how many years it has been, the two of us are still at odds as always. He sighed. He knew that everything Charles did was for the good of mutants, but he was still as naive as ever. So you will take the X-Men to participate in this war, right? Eric asked. Yes, we have no choice. Professor X replied. Although his voice was calm, it revealed a kind of determination and firmness. As soon as the voice fell, Magneto's momentum suddenly burst out, as if an invisible storm was coming. This powerful momentum made Wolverine, Cyclops and Storm feel an unprecedented sense of oppression, and they immediately surrounded Professor X vigilantly. However, Magneto did not attack them, but turned and walked out the door. At the moment he was about to leave the hall, he looked at Professor X deeply, and then said, Charles, you always think I am wrong, but this time, you are the wrong party. Our Brotherhood of Mutants will also participate in this war. Professor X heard this and showed a surprised expression on his face. He didn't understand why Magneto decided to get involved when this war had no direct relationship with their Brotherhood. Was it to help him? However, Magneto's next words shocked Professor X and his team even more. But I am on the side of Hell's Kitchen and I am here to stop you. He turned and walked out the door, leaving Storm and Cyclops in shock. They looked at Professor X, who looked serious, as if asking what to do. Professor X knew that with the intervention of Magneto, this war would become more difficult. Where can we mutants find a place to stay? I hope everyone will support it and subscribe more.